How's it going, everybody? It is your favorite apostates. I'm McKay.
I'm Jordan.
And we're here doing a video that we were going to do initially and then decided that we might not be able to do. And we found a way because we love you and we want to bring you what you want. Also, note the return of the prayer hands. We finally have a setup where I can put them back and they're visible, albeit
they're going to be
small.
Adjusted. So that's not their permanent spot for everybody who's about to comment. They're not centered. It's okay.
It's
okay.
I was fiddling with it and I messed it up and I thought,
Never fear.
You know what? It's too late. I cannot wait doing this anymore. Anyway, the way we are able to do it is because of our wonderful sponsor today. Shout out to adamandeve.com. Adam and Eve is the leading adult toy company in the USA with more than 50 years that they have built up a reputation as a trusted and reliable adult store that takes pleasure and privacy seriously. Their shipping is always discreet, so you don't have to worry about things going missing when they get delivered to your doorstep.
Or snoopy neighbors.
Yeah, snoopy neighbors who might get jealous of the deals that you've gotten.
If you're looking to fight purity culture, shame culture, all the toxic stuff that goes with that, and you're in the process maybe of even deconstructing, then adamandeve.com has a great deal for you. So you heard that right. adamandeve.com right now. Use code Jordan. That's me.
Jordan50.
Jordan50, Jordan50. You can see it on the screen. And you get 50% off one item and
free shipping. Freaking awesome deal.
Anywhere in the US and Canada, as usual, with exclusions apply.
Adam and Eve has not only been really awesome to us, but they're really awesome to everybody, and you can help be a part of the difference that they make because 20% of their profits goes to helping fight the spread of HIV around the world. So you get an awesome purchase and you can feel good about your awesome purchase.
So again, thank you to Adam and Eve for sponsoring our video, and we appreciate them. And remember to use the code Jordan50.
Again, thank you, Adam and Eve, for making this one possible. You guys are lifesavers. We love you through and through. Always, they're like the day ones.
So today will we be talking about that? I don't know. Will we? Today we will be talking about the very well popular received, I don't know what I'm trying to say, video done by Jubilee a few weeks ago where they brought Mormons and ex-Mormons together with the purpose of trying to see if they could see eye to eye. This includes some faces that you may recognize from the Mormon and ex-Mormon community alike.
Unfortunately not ours, but...
Unfortunately not ours. We don't have the ability to just hop on a plane to LA and film something like that. One face that you will probably recognize is that of John DeLynn, host of Mormon Stories podcast. If you are not familiar with their channel, we have a 9-hour interview of my life story, McKay's life story, and how we got to our YouTube channel.
Our Mormon story.
Our Mormon story. We will link it in the description, and I will try to remember to put it up here. And so check that out if you haven't already.
If you're on this channel watching this video,
you probably
have heard of Mormon Stories podcast.
But if you haven't, shout out to John.
Shout out.
So yeah, that's what we're going to watch today. And I've already been told that this is going to anger me beyond human comprehension. And so, no, I am really not enthused to be watching this today. But because we love you.
We're putting in the work.
And because I have FOMO, we will be watching it. And I will probably regret this. So, thank you.
Without further ado, let's get to it.
This is an hour-long video. We will see how much of it I can make it through. We might call it at halfway through. McKay wants to get to the end. I don't know if I'll be able to make it. So, come along for the ride.
Yes. We'll see if we make it to the final ones. Maybe if we get sick of everything, we'll just move on to the next chapter.
Fair. That could work.
Anyway, let's get to it.
I am saying that
That's a yes or no. That's a yes or no.
Do I believe that Heavenly Father would keep her out of the celestial kingdom if she
If she continues to have lesbian relationships?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Gen, and I explore social and controversial issues through both sides. And I'll be moderating this episode of Middle Ground, Mormons versus Ex-Mormons. And the first prompt is, Mormonism is a cult.
If you're trying to moderate something from an unbiased perspective, having a debate where it's one group of people versus the other group of people, that sort of language does not lend itself to, let's have a lovely, like, calm discussion about this. It's like, who's gonna be better, the ex-Mormons or the Mormons coming out of the rit? Like, that's the vibes I'm getting from this.
Cage match.
Yeah.
For the purposes of entertainment, it does work.
I understand.
And having a conversation, but I don't think that there's much mind changing that will be going on.
Probably not.
You know, I think some of the things that are important to pay attention to are like critical things in your life that you're told how you're supposed to do them.
If you vaguely remember, I don't remember her name. I'll have McKay put it on the screen in post, but this lovely person on the right here, Jillian, did, she got all that, like, worldwide attention because at BYU graduation, she, like, had sewed the inside of her graduation gown with rainbow colors. And it gained, like, national attention, and a bunch of news agencies covered it. So, shout out to Jillian.
I haven't seen Jillian in a minute.
I like your sexuality, the way you dress, what you eat.
What underwear you wear. What made me finally, because it was hard to admit growing.
Some text on the screen. Damn it, I can't see. Hold on. Mormon underwear, temple garments are worn by adult members of the church who have made sacred promises of fidelity to God's commandments.
At Mormon, it was hard to admit that it was a cult, but I think when you look at, again, the critical thinking, the lack of it, I think is a big red flag.
I feel like with Mormonism and growing up in that culture, which is...
I'm sorry, how awkward is it that the Mormons just have to stand over there in the corner?
Well,
it's
sure
like they're in
the
trouble.
Ex-Mormons are going to get their moment as well.
that word right there. I had no issue stepping forward, but not necessarily...
We have Jillian.
And Dillian?
And Dillian.
Or is it Dylan and it's just spelled weird?
Dylan.
I could see that
We
being
will
Dylan.
see, I guess, if somebody calls it
necessarily
last name.
to specifically focus on the negative connotation, but really just what the word is. Let's call it what it is.
I'll just speak kind of from a psychological perspective because that's my background. Does the organism...
John, don't hate the facial hair. It is unsettling because I've only ever known John with clean-shaven face.
With clean shaven.
Withhold information from its members with the intent of controlling the thoughts of the members? Does the organization manipulate the members through emotion? And then do they have excessive controls of behavior? And while it's deeply offensive to tell anyone they're a member of a cult, no one's going to ever say they're a member of a cult because no one thinks they're in a cult.
Can we have the disagreeers?
I mean, that's solid.
It's 100% the reason why I tend, unless I'm trying to be a troll and inflammatory, I tend to shy away from the cult label because it is very...
Language matters.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's inflammatory and it's kind of, people have a really visceral reaction.
Probably
to
going to elicit a backfire effect because people are going to immediately get defensive.
Yeah,
Productive
exactly.
conversations are difficult to have when somebody's being defensive.
Yeah. And overall, it's kind of just better. And people can at least come to an agreement when you say like a high demand religion or high demand group or things like that, because you cannot deny that the Mormon church demand a lot of its members. So
Indeed.
a little bit of a middle ground, but it, still critical.
Step forward.
So I'm
Come
a
along,
convert to the church,
afterthoughts.
and
Oh, they didn't like swap out. Okay. So
That's
we
funny.
do have some other familiar faces here.
If you watch the Mormon Bachelor with us,
yes,
you'll know
who
Kwaku.
loves
Attention.
the camera and dressing up in dresses, even though it does seem like he's kind of critical of
On
queer folks.
The Bachelor, the Mormon
yeah,
Bachelor. Let's
Provost
clarify where that
Mustelable.
came from.
Yeah. And then the guy over here, who I don't even know his name. I've seen his face too many times, but he is the Ward Radio guy and a close.
I thought the guy on the right
friend.
was the Ward Radio guy.
Oh, that's him.
That's
him.
Cardin,
Okay,
isn't
yeah.
it?
That's Jillian. Sorry, Jillian.
No, the guy sitting next to her is who I thought you were talking about.
Oh, I think I circled him. Or
Her. You're gonna need to cut that
I'm
whole
cutting
thing
that
out.
one. Let me just redo it.
Yeah.
And then over here is the Ward radio guy. I don't even know his name.
I think it's like Cardin or something. We'll find out in a minute.
I think it is Cardin. I've seen his face enough times, but I have never bothered to learn his name.
I don't enjoy him.
Anyway, it's usually just clips of their weird podcast anyway.
And born and raised in an apartment family, lived a gay lifestyle before I joined the church. And
Not really doing any favors with the Mormon names here.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Even though he's a convert.
Timber.
He came
oh,
in-
he's a convert, so his
Yeah,
parents
he
are
came
not
in
even
late.
Mormon.
He's
Maybe.
Maybe he will say he's an ex-gay, or if he's still gay and decided to join the church.
it's
Let me emphasize the quotes on ex-gay, because
Yeah.
I don't think that's a thing.
it's a little disingenuous to me when people say that the church tried to hide stuff from me, because I grew up in a family that was very stereotypical. So it was just very strict, and I remember things being talked about like polygamy, like lots of sensitive church history topics growing up, and that's partially why when I distanced myself from Christianity generally to go live a gay lifestyle, I really had concerns with the church.
The
Shout
gay
out to everybody
lifestyle.
living the gay lifestyle. We love you. You're welcome here.
Shut up.
But ultimately, knowing those things only strengthened my testimony when I came back to it. I completely left that
Oh,
lifestyle.
so I guess I missed that. He was a member and then left, and then
He did a Saturday's Warrior
Oh,
prodigal
yeah.
son type
There
thing,
we
but
go.
gay version,
the better version.
and then came back. Okay, I'm tracking.
Although the whole Rockstar arc was pretty cool. Not
That was
gonna
pretty
lie.
cool.
Shout out
The
Saturday's
new
Warrior.
one, yeah.
Behind, and of course, I still have same-sex attraction, but I am definitely
Okay.
happier now being married to a woman, having kids, than I was with my boyfriends.
When I think of
This is interesting, okay? Because there's lots of nuance to be held here, and this is a common dynamic within the church, and the church actually endorses and supports this. A lot of times they will have, like...
Hey, endorses is kind of putting it lightly. I would
Yeah.
say pedestalizes this kind of.
Yes. So, like,
dynamic.
when I was active Mormon, they brought a guy and a gal who were married, and he was gay, and they had the two of them kind of rotate to different wards around the area and speak about their experience as him having same-sex attraction and her knowing that and deciding to be married to him and, decided to have that experience. Now, as a therapist who works with people in Utah, I have seen the other end of this agreement. Actually, I have had clients who have had participated in these kinds of marriages, and it doesn't normally end well, and it doesn't lend itself to allowing each individual person to be their authentic selves within a relationship. And it's dangerous. Like, there are people who, there's an epidemic of this horrible, and I guess we'll get to this when it comes to the LGBTQ stuff, but like LGBTQ plus Mormons or Mormon adjacent people who are committing suicide because of the rhetoric around Mormons and around Mormonism and not feeling like they have a place to be within the church. And so as a therapist, I look at this and I see how damaging it can be to reinforce this lifestyle as yes, this is good for you, even though each person in that relationship, like I work with couples, each person in that relationship is entitled to like a healthy dynamic where both of them are getting out of it what they want. And some people have decided that this is what they want, and I'm not trying to encourage anyone away from that necessarily, but I've seen how poorly this can go, and both people in a partnership should be able to get their needs met.
Yeah.
Like, and it's your job to facilitate, meeting your needs, but it's not fair for necessarily someone in the relationship to, not be able to enjoy sex with a partner or not be able to see like the general stereotypical, heterosexual relationship that most Mormons desire, because most of these people have the mentality, if I'm just faithful enough, Like, this is what God wants. This is what God has aligned for me. This is like my cross to bear. I can hold this. I can take this. This is, and, you know, a lot of the people who aren't queer who are in these relationships are like, I still love this person and I have enough faith to know that I'm going to get to where I need to be and I'm helping my partner get there.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of baggage to that particular dynamic.
Yeah. Or even more sinisterly, there could be people who are just toughing it out, for lack of a better term, or enduring to the end because, and I'm not saying this is true of all people, but there is a widespread belief that being gay is a trial of the flesh that will go away when you
We
are
just try
resurrected.
hard enough. Or
So they are like, I will endure this lifetime so that they will be attracted to me in the eternities or something, which is not
heartbreaking if you think about it from the
really
perspective
sucks.
of somebody who does not believe in necessarily an afterlife.
Yeah.
Is like, what a waste.
Yeah.
Like, what a waste. Like, banking on thinking that you're going to be able to spend your next life living the way that you actually want to live. Like, I'm not trying to discourage anyone from that way of thinking, because if that's what you believe, then that's valid. But like, for the people who are holding out hope that they'll be able
big
to
gamble.
live that way in their next life, it's a big risk to take to not live it in the one that you have.
Yeah.
That you know that you have.
Yeah. And this is not to like say that these are so long as both partners are understanding what's happening when they
Consenting adults.
decide to get married, or more importantly, they have children in their marriage, because children are going to be affected by a divorce and things of that nature. That's important because there are people out there who live and have perfectly fulfilling relationships without having sexual intimacy and things like that. Shout out to our ACE population and viewers. We love them. So, yeah, just interesting to note.
A cult, I think of an organization that's really controlling, and they don't let you exercise freedom or autonomy. They control how you think. They control what you say.
Oh boy. This is, I have
Listen to the playback.
I have some empathy for Kwaku, because we used to think like this about Scientology. We've talked about this before on our channel. I think we talked about it in our
true.
Mormon Stories interview. We watched Scientology and we're like, holy shit. These
That's a
people,
cult.
this
What?
is so culty. I can't believe they do things like this. And the parallels between Scientology
Yeah.
and Mormonism are whack. Not to say they're exactly the same, but they're there.
Two different brands of the same flavor soda.
And how you say it.
Indeed.
But if I look at Mormon culture expansively, I don't see people that are controlled. I feel like the word cult, I mean, if you break it down to mean at some point someone suggested that I live my life a certain way, then everything's a cult. And if everything's a cult, then nothing's a cult.
There
What?
are
I mean, I think if you're a person that labels
syndrome
everything as a
logic.
cult, then that
Yeah.
that would stand. But I don't think most of us walk around labeling everything that we see as a cult.
Yeah. And that's also kind of the issue that people bring up when you start labeling things as cults, is the terms can really be, the term is really very nebulous. It's not really definite, and you can see that there are common like characteristics and principles throughout these damaging groups.
Sure.
But there's not really anything concrete that you could say, oh yeah, this is definitely a cult, and this is not, even when you see those characteristics in other places. That's why, I don't know, high demand.
why we try
or
not to use
high
it.
control religion,
Yeah.
it's better.
many members of the church who have this mindset that when the prophet speaks, the debate is over and you should just not think about it. And that's not right.
That's literally a quote from
That's-
one of, like, that's been repeated and regurgitated by
prophet's
female leaders. Like, when the like, I can't remember what it is specifically, but ladies, when the prophet speaks,
I think
the
Elaine
debate
Dalton
is over, or
also.
it's over. Like, it is black and white, tried and true.
Yeah, bad thinking.
We had that in our last video on MLMs, if you haven't seen that one.
Sorry, it wasn't the prophet's wife. I'll put the proper, it was Elaine Cannon, not Elaine Dalton.
In the 1970s.
You get them mixed up a lot, but
There's a lot of
the
lanes.
sentiment is still there. People, I don't know why they say, oh yeah, we just don't trust the prophet without, like, uncritically, because that's how I lived.
That's what we did.
I honestly,
We literally sang it in primary. Follow the prophet, follow the prophet, follow the prophet, don't go astray.
Yeah,
I don't know
like-
how else to interpret that.
that is cultish.
And what is that? Like, that is cultish. Like, literally, he just said it. That is cultish when you're chanting something like that over and over, even if it takes the form of a song, right? Like,
Yeah.
that is
That children are
messaging.
singing.
That's a children's hymn that they're repeating.
But that is not what the church has taught over time.
I think, though, that you are told, seek your own answer, pray, but if it differs from what the prophet is saying, then
apostasy.
you might be being
By and
deceived
large.
by Satan, or you got the wrong answer. It should ultimately align with what the prophet is saying. And that's why they say, you know, read the Book of Mormon, pray, see if it's true for yourself. And if you don't get an answer, pray harder.
Keep doing it.
Go talk to someone, have more experiences, try again, until you get the right answer that it's true. So I think it's a little disingenuous to say that you can.
That's what I did as a missionary.
That's what they tell you to do at the temple.
Yeah. If somebody ever came back and they were like, well, I prayed about it and I didn't really have it, feel like I had an answer.
Try harder.
It wasn't like, pack it up. Okay, well, I guess it's not true for them. We're going. It's, okay, well, you didn't try hard enough. You need to try again.
Yeah.
Let's do it right now. Oftentimes, that's what we would do. Let's do it right now. And we kneel down
We'll
and we'd
peer-
be like,
we'll
let's-
peer
you're gonna
pressure
pray-
you into
yeah,
it.
you're going to pray about feeling if the Book of Mormon is true.
All I would feel is anxiety, but, you know, that's
Yeah.
just me.
Seek truth on your own that doesn't align with the prophet, because that doesn't generally just seem to be how it goes.
Yeah, but that completely goes in the face of, I was a missionary for 2 years, and the number one message we do when we present the Book of Mormon and Mormonism at large to somebody is,
Why is Cardin the only one wearing a suit?
It's not even really like, it's like a blazer because there's like
Also,
this
his
stitching
tie
on it.
is askew. Like, this is giving, like,
is a
I'm the
bad
most
knot.
important person here. Like, dude, you went on a mission for 2 years and you can't tie your tie well? Like, what is that?
It's the deacon knot. It's not even like a half Windsor or anything like that.
Okay.
the infamous Moroni's promise. We say, go home, pray about it. You need to develop a relationship with God that is so unique and strong that you can recognize when He is talking to you, whether or not this is the path you're supposed to take. The idea that Mormonism is a cult is a pejorative trope that has...
Ooh, big words, Cardin.
Somebody hit up the
Big words.
Invariably, people like Cardin are going to be in the comments section and say, oh, well, that's not how you're supposed to teach Moroni's promise as a missionary.
I don't
know
care.
what to tell you, buddy. My mission president must have been wrong because he was the one who was helping everybody.
And
all
he
the
taught
leadership.
thousands of
Yeah.
people that same way.
So I don't know what to tell you.
Weird. Weird.
Take it up with my mission
an
president.
anti-Mormon slur against the church for a long time.
A
And
slur, Cardin? What?
I beg your pardon.
Dude, that is... You might need to reference
that-
what slurs mean, my friend.
On that note, I'm going to say cult even harder now.
Well, okay, if it was an actual slur, then everyone in that room would respond to it a little bit differently when anyone said it.
Yeah.
And nobody would be saying it all of the time.
I would expect a more visceral
Hello?
reaction.
always ask, by what rubric? You mentioned the bite
Rubric.
model before, and I've seen that you've interviewed Stephen Hassan on your show, and he's
Hassan.
given a rubric. Well, that same author has called anybody that voted for Donald Trump a cult. He wrote an entire book about the cult of...
Oh, we're
he
getting
came-
political now.
He came prepared.
Well, I'm sure they all have thoughts on
Well-
Dr. Hassan.
And this is the corny part, is they think that we leave Mormonism and then all of a sudden we just found like a new god. Oh, we all worship
John
the
DeLynn.
ground that John DeLynn walks on. Oh, Stephen Hassan did the bite model. We all worship Stephen Hassan. There's no way he could steer us wrong. But he's not, he's just one person. There's so many other people that you can
There's so
consider-
many ex-Mormons who don't agree with John. That's like a,
Yeah.
I mean, shit, there's plenty of them. McCann and I always talk about how there's really no such thing as an ex-Mormon community because we don't really, like, we
our
are people
common
who
thing
have
is-
something in common
And it is that we used to belong to the
to a
Mormon
thing.
Church.
And now none of us have anywhere near the same belief systems, the same views
Yeah.
about the world politically, the same views about the afterlife. Like, there might be some overlap, but largely we don't have, like, we don't follow a structure. There's not like a thing in common that we all have, or we're all like, oh, we all worship,
Ultimately,
praise the man John DeLynn. Like,
I
that's not
feel
happening.
like by and large, it's ultimately transitionary.
Yeah.
Like you are with these people who left this club
Yeah.
because we all had a bad time.
Bad time.
Some of us more than other people. It was built for people like me, so I didn't have that bad of a time. But ultimately, I feel like we end up going and finding our people, and we're like, you know what? I don't feel like I need to be about this anymore. Not me. I'm going to be on this shit forever. But
Notably, I think, and I'm being presumptuous because there could be people on here who are white passing, but notably there are no women of color represented in this discussion that I just want to point out, which I think is relevant here.
One of the...
We have Kwaku, but I'm talking about women specifically.
One of the demographics that was definitely extra.
Largely underrepresented.
Extra having a bad time.
Trump. And if you apply any of these bite model methodologies or any of these cult definitions, my show choir in high school was a cult. Apple is a cult.
What?
That's exactly why I don't use the term as much, because people
This is what they do.
They get hung up on, there are a few characteristics that they have in common with this cult. We could call anything a cult. So
yeah, no. That's not how it works,
ultimately,
dude.
it becomes an unproductive conversation. Hello, Baloney.
Till the next Star Wars movie comes out, it's a cult. That word is used in the same way with the same inefficacy and the inability to back it up, unless you use people that, unfortunately, in your case, were not actually being truly Mormon.
Stephen Hassan would agree that
What is
Apple
truly
can
Mormon?
have some of the traits of a cult or the military or an educational institution or a corporation, but he also has a harm continuum, a continuum of harm. And if you add up all the deaths of the People's Temple, Jim Jones, of any of the cults you mentioned, it won't add up to the number of LGBT youth in the Mormon Church that have killed themselves. And so
that's
the point that we're always going to come back to.
That's another part that's hard, because in those groups like Jonestown and the Branch Davidians, and
they
all the
are
things,
extreme.
The casualties and the circumstances regarding those casualties are jarring, and they are very public, and a lot of times they're all in one place at the same time. So it makes headline news. Meanwhile, what John is bringing up, there are youth, LGBTQ youth, that are harming themselves at an alarming rate. And it doesn't really make the news because it's not this like mass extinction.
It's not a bunch of people
death.
living on a farm property and
Yeah.
doing weird shit and the government's suspicious of from day one, you know?
I mean, it's the same thing with Scientology, where they're out there in select markets putting out a Super Bowl ad, but they constantly harass their former members, especially ones who were like leadership, like Mike Rinder and Leah Remini and the likes of them. And their president, David Miscavige's wife, has been missing for well over a decade. Nobody has seen her. And I mean, usually when somebody's missing that long, you can draw the conclusion yourself, but people don't really, I mean, people are like, oh yeah, Scientology's a cult, but nobody's out there really. They still have enough pull with the public that they can put out a Super Bowl ad.
Yeah.
And they still gain new following all the time.
We can talk about just severity of, children are cut off. Some children are homeless because their parents kick them out. Now, I'll admit, the Mormon Church does a lot of good for a lot of people. But if you just add up the amount of harm, I think that's when it goes from just a silly
Cardin looks like he's going to explode.
to a very serious conversation.
I can't vouch
and that's also another thing, is it does do a lot of good for a lot of people, but you have to be a certain demographic of people.
Well, I mean, look at, if we, and this is maybe a controversial take, but if we reshape this argument to a person, like if we were to say a person, like, Ted Bundy, for example. Like, Ted Bundy was a really good guy. Like, he had a lot of charisma. He was really kind to people. He was very kind to women. Like, he joined the Mormon Church, actually, and Mormon Church members actually protested his arrest because they didn't possibly think that he could have been the one that murdered all these people.
Not our Ted on there.
Not our Ted. And so you have that, but then you also have like, wow, he murdered all these women, like brutally murdered all these women. And so it's like, okay, yes, we can do good things. And people are like, you know, maybe this is a terrible example, but from my opinion, that's just how we can't equate. Like things don't cancel each other out. Things don't balance out. Like we have mass harm being committed, not murder necessarily, but maybe some people would think of it as such when children are killing themselves. And then we have like the church is willing to donate to, you know, other countries to feed people or help with natural disasters. And it's like, that's great, but the house is on fire over here. Yeah. And what are we doing over here? Like, you can like pour all your money over there and that's great, but I'm still wondering what we're doing about the house that's on fire over here. Like, we're just going to ignore the glaringly obvious thing that's back there and focus on how we can put our money elsewhere.
That an organization as large as the LDS Church doesn't have any damage. Obviously, people can do damage, but at the same token, if we hold every
tokens. Signs and tokens.
Organization to a standard that implies they can't have any sort of cultural stains that the entire country has struggled with, well, good luck.
Okay, so I'm going to identify this as a therapist right here. This is what we call black and white thinking. This is thinking in extremes. There is no nuance. It's, well, all organizations do bad things. Well, every church does bad shit. Like, there's also fallacies at play here, right? Like, we're whataboutisming things also right now. Like, this is just an example of black and white thinking. There is no nuance here. There is no, like, we can't hold the Mormon church accountable because everybody else does the same thing. Well, I don't think everybody else does the same thing. Other people are capable of creating harm, yes, but now we're shifting into whataboutism and we're like, well, look over there. Okay, well, yes, Kwaku, that's bad too. Like, do we need to address each and every individual one and have a conversation about how all of these are also not great?
Yeah.
Like, that's why this whole thing doesn't hold water for me.
Conversation. Let's focus on the topic.
We're trying to shift.
And as someone who believes in Jesus Christ, my hope and my goal is we can get rid of it. We can get rid of that out of our church eventually. But that is not a unique.
Eventually. How many kids have to kill themselves before we get to that point, Kwaku?
Apparently 200 years is not enough.
How many parents have to lose a child? How many kids have to live with the trauma of their parents kicking them out and being homeless or ultimately dying eventually? Like, is that not high on your priority list? Hello?
That is a problem that was given to us by the generations that came before, the generations that said separate water fountains, the generations that said, oh, you're gay, you should be going to camp, whether it's a Baptist, Mormons, whatever. That stuff is evil. But does that evil make us uniquely evil, or is that a Western American?
How evil are we on the evil spectrum, you guys? We're only this much. So it's okay. Because the Branch Davidians over there, like, they killed all those people, and that's really bad. And we're not doing that.
Well, that was the FBI.
I mean,
ATF.
You know, but that's what I mean. Like, comparison-wise, it's like, okay, how evil do you want to be on the scale? How about we just don't be evil at all?
What are we? Evil from, like, Wile E. Coyote to, like, I don't even know.
Like,
Nazi Germany?
What is your reference point? If this is based, like, if you're truly talking about how this religion is based in Jesus and Christ and being Christ-like and compassionate, I'm lost on why this is even part of the discussion. Because I don't think Jesus would tolerate hate or discrimination in any form. But yet here we are.
Well, Jordan, that's where you're wrong, apparently.
Mormon Jesus does it different.
Jesus is built different.
Problem that has permeated these organizations.
The Mormon community welcomes the LGBTQ community.
I don't know how you guys could even
that 94%
be on the same, like, oh my God, this blows my mind. It blows my mind to think that there are people that are truly so lost in the Mormon sauce to think that they are accepting of LGBTQ people. And I mean, they want to shed the cult thing, but to hold that viewpoint is very cult-like. It is very cult-like, knowing the information that we know. Knowing that they don't have the same benefits, knowing that couples who get married and still want to participate in the church and go to church every Sunday get excommunicated regardless of whether they want to be there or not. Like, we have historically and presently, because they like to use the word historic and say that this is stuff that's been happening, but it's happening right now.
Yeah.
So we're just willing to look right past that, see right through that to support our own narrative. This Mormon girl looks over it.
So as a gay member of the church, I truly believe that I feel welcome. I feel at home in the church. I realize.
Why is Kwaku sitting this one out?
With,
because he said no. Oh, so their seating arrangements is based on how they answered the question, I think. We don't usually watch Jubilee stuff, guys. So don't hate us. But I think it's how they answer the question. Which would be why Kwaku would be standing out. If he thinks that the church doesn't support gay members, which I think is a factual thing.
Maybe Kwaku's right and we have the wrong idea about him. Although that last answer was
not
ridiculous.
helping, but maybe that's what's happening here.
Sexual expression should only be between a married man and woman, but that same standard applies to everyone. And the scriptures are clear that male and female, black and white, bond and free, all are welcome to come unto Christ, and that's the purpose of the church.
That's what the scriptures say, and that's what I think a lot of people, like a lot of progressive Christians, interpret as Jesus. But what does policy and church leaders say? Because those are very different.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's go.
Agrees that no matter like what you are, and who you love, they're not gonna shun you because of that. You might not get the same.
Girl, did we participate in the same Mormonism?
I feel like this is where they kind of it feels like they're just being dense on purpose.
Almost.
In a lot of cases, because they're like, I don't even remember what his name was. But look at him. He's gay and he's perfectly comfortable in the church.
Yeah.
And they're like, everybody can come to our church and they can participate in our church. But the thing is, you're not allowed to love who you want to love.
And you are going to be shunned if
And
you do participate in that relationship.
Like, you can love somebody, but you cannot express that love in any sort of way. Baloney, you're kind of ruining my point here. Get out of here. So, I don't know. It's like you can't express that love to somebody that you do love if they are not on the right side of the gender spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
You can't live authentically as a trans person and be able to enter the temple if you've done any sort of HRT.
You can't even
any sort of gender affirming care or anything like that.
You can't even follow the law of chastity with a person of the same gender and still participate in church stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can even obey the rules and not have sex before marriage, and it still doesn't matter. You're still gonna have temple restrictions.
Yeah.
You're probably gonna get potentially temple recommend taken away. You might not be able to take the sacrament. Like, that's kind of up in the air right now, but by and large, that's typically what we see, or you just get excommunicated altogether. And so, I mean, maybe it's the own density of I'm so insulated from other people's experiences that I only can bear witness to my own. That would be my only other thought.
This day and age, there's nothing you could compare it to, because invariably they might compare it to, well, it's a sin, and you obviously have to put off that sin in order to live and be part of the Mormon church. But there is nothing else that you could compare it to that's even close to an innate part of who you are that you would have to put on. Like, nobody is born a Mormon alcoholic. That's not a sin that is innate to you. You might be predisposed to being an alcoholic because of whatever traits. I don't know. I'm not a biologist in any sense of the word. But you don't have to work hard to put that sin off just being yourself or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you are queer in any capacity, you have to put that off and behave in the way that they want you to behave.
Privileges necessarily, but that doesn't, in the church,
Wait,
they
what
won't
do you mean
shun.
about privileges? Like,
Such as
elaborate.
like going to the temple, that kind of a privilege. So
yeah, but that also is the same for straight people. If you're not
No, it's
living
not.
the law of chastity,
This is exactly what I'm talking about.
Talking about apples and oranges here.
straight, you could have your temple recommended.
it's
But literally, we have this example of this couple that we just did this whole topic on with Mormon stories, where we have a gay couple who waited to have sex until they were married based on their own reports.
Yeah.
They waited, and so they followed the law of chastity in that sense.
They got married.
They got married.
Are they allowed to enter the temple?
No. By their own report.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm not even making insinuations there. That's straight out of their mouth. And so this whole well, that's same for straight people. No, it's not.
Yeah. Because a straight person or a person,
they can repent.
A gay person, they could have premarital sex and they would both be precluded from temple attendance. But that straight person can get married and do the same thing, and they're good to go.
Or they can repent with their bishop, and then they can get their temple recommend back. It's that simple. So no, this isn't really the same.
It's very personal, but the church doesn't specifically, when you're invited to church, they don't come up
It sounds like she disagrees, so I don't know why Kweku is.
to you
Maybe.
and ask you, are
Sit
you
down.
straight? They're very welcome.
Yes,
Are you
yes.
straight? Are you lesbian? Are you gay? They ask you about
You
yourself.
don't have to fill out a form?
No.
Oh, see, when I walked in,
know.
I had to fill out a form.
Like this is
Cardin
shut up.
is
This
just-
is not the time for a joke like that. It's they want to focus on yes, and this is what I like about it is people will go in and regardless of who they are, there will be somebody who will be happy to sit next to them. But that's different from them being welcome and being able to participate in the same capacities as the straight people who
Are doing the
were
same
okay
thing.
to sit next to them and welcome them into the fold.
Yeah.
Can the disagreeers please step forward, please?
Oh, see, disagreeers.
Okay.
The concept that straight people and gay people have it equally hard to enter the temple is a complete
Is
joke.
asinine.
Because
Thank
straight
you.
people, yes, also have to deal with their trials and their faith and live the law of chastity, do X, Y, and Z, and yet they're not having to go against their instincts or their nature. It's all lined up for them. Like if we were to flip it and say that being gay is the norm in the church, let's just pretend for a second, and you were the straight one, and you wanted to go to the temple, and in order to go to the temple, you would have to swear to never sleep with women again, and you would only be able to sleep with men. That
He doesn't sleep with women now, so that's not a problem for him.
would feel very wrong to you. Yeah?
Got his ass.
I completely understand. We live in a hypersexualized society, and I think
What?
that is
Where are we going?
That is not.
very,
What are we
very
talking about?
difficult for
Off
gay,
the rails.
lesbian, transgender members of the church, and so on and so forth. And just as Timber said, the Lord in his infinite mercy does not spare any of us from trials. But
Okay.
this idea that, I don't want to say that their trial is
Look how far away this guy is trying to get from him. He's like, how can I move
Dylan,
away from
Dylan.
this guy as much as possible?
unique because it is unique. But I look at it a little bit differently. I have leukemia. My illness will kill me 20 years earlier than Timber. You don't think
Is he being for real right now?
I know that this man is not comparing being gay to having cancer because, but if he is, which I think he is, then this is absolutely a self-report because this is how he views.
It's a sickness to him.
This is how he views queer people. He views it as an illness, something that you need to be cured of, something that needs to be fixed, something that you can overcome.
exactly
Like
what
people
I was
got
saying.
very inflammatory about the fact that he said this, and I agree. As a queer person, I agree. This is asinine, but this doesn't surprise me at all because this is just his subconscious, like nearly a Freudian slip of his interpretation of how he views gay people.
Oh, there's no mask.
There is none.
There's no mask.
you don't
Oh,
think
wow,
on
that-
my deathbed.
That was it.
Oh, never mind.
Forgive me.
For what?
You don't think that I wouldn't trade a little bit of Timber's gayness for 20 years extra on this earth?
Give me some of your gayness. I'll take
Oh
like
my
5
God.
for, we're like Ethan. I'm like 16% bisexual. Like give me 5% of your gayness. And I'll give you my cancer. Is that a fair
I'll
trade?
give you 5% cancer. Trade offer.
Like-
I give you 5% cancer and you give me 5% gay.
And this further underscores the point that Cardin and people like him do not view people's queerness as a part of who they are. It's a trait. It's something that can be taken from you. It's something that can be selected or removed. It's why people believe that conversion therapy works. Like, he doesn't believe queerness is an innate part of who you are.
Yeah.
Because even in this conversation, he's talking about, like, just give me some of your gayness. That's like equating, like, give me some of who you are. Give me some of your soul. Give me part of
Yeah.
your being. And that's not something that you can do.
and
so,
I'll
again,
give you this being sick.
right. So, again, this is just highlighting exactly how he
Yeah.
views queerness and queer people.
And I hope maybe this was just a poorly thought out thing because I like to think, I mean, I've seen the guy say things and I don't like what he says, but it seems like he is a calculated kind of person and he thinks through what he's speaking. So I hope it maybe
you're
was
giving
just
him a lot of
miscalculation.
credit.
I'm giving him a plenty of credit.
Too much.
I'm hoping, I'm trying to build a bridge here.
So if Timber has a loss of faith because being gay in a hypersexualized world with a law of chastity from the Bible.
I'm sorry we're pausing so much, but again, we're linking hypersexualization and queerness. We're trying to link grooming and queerness, pedophilia and queerness. Like, we're trying to bridge the gap between those two things and say they're connected when they're actually not.
Yeah.
Well, that he doesn't understand. I get that, because we live in a cruel, hypersexualized world. But I stare down the barrel of a chemotherapy pill every day that keeps me alive. I will die probably the same time my father does. It's a trial, and it sucks, but welcome to the club. That's why.
No. Thank you. Jillian's enough. Enough of you.
We'll let her
To
cook.
say that being gay is a trial is disgusting. That is
Thank you.
offensive.
This is exactly what I said earlier. I didn't even need to see to know where
You
it
don't
was
think
going.
dying early is disgusting to me?
What about?
I'm saying that
Dying early is not dying. If you're living righteously, don't you want to get to the celestial kingdom even quicker? I don't know. I'm being a little bit flippant, but
the way that the church sees people being born gay is like being born with cancer.
I think she was more upset.
What
that
I
you
just
referred-
said.
You basically
To
codified it
refer.
as an illness.
As
No,
a
I'm saying if
trial
you have a
sort of
loss
thing.
of
No.
faith because of it.
Being gay is not a trial. Being gay in the church is a trial because
There we
of how
go.
they treat you and how they see it.
W.
How they see gay people is like being born with cancer. They're
I
like,
hate
we're
this
so
camera angle.
sorry you were born this way. You can be that way, but don't do anything about it.
You can have cancer and go to the temple. You can have cancer and have these privileges. You can have cancer and get to the celestial kingdom. So, like, this whole, he didn't think this through, like, at all. This is just him projecting his own disgusting view of gay people into the room.
I went to BYU. I took tests where they said they had asked questions like, how do we treat members of the LGBTQ community? And the answer was to love them unconditionally, but understand that they will never be truly as happy as those who follow the Mormon religion. And so that is so painful to read and see, because the trial isn't being gay. Actually, being gay is incredible. Being attracted to someone of the same sex is beautiful, and I've never been happier. The trial comes when the church tells you that that is wrong, and hopefully when you die, that cancer of being gay will be gone. That's the trial.
Yes, like I said, it is not an innate part of who you are. It will go away.
Yep.
It's something that can be taken from you.
I disagree. I think we all have equal opportunity for happiness. I think happiness looks different for other people. And I can say that I had a semblance of happiness when I was with my boyfriends. And
this is another thing that they do, and I'm really sad to see Timber kind of caught up in this thinking, is that people who live and they are sinning, they do not experience true happiness. Period. End of sentence.
And
They
there's
won't
always
ever
like
know true
there's a
happiness
shoe
in this.
drop coming. Like if they look happy right now, just wait because
Just
the
wait.
other shoe is going to drop and they're going
Yep.
to be unhappy again.
Or
'Cause
well,
they can't
could be
experience
they
it.
could be seemingly happy all their life, but once they are on to the next one, then they're really gonna get their true reward.
Like
which
Mormons
is,
always believe it's coming back to them.
He's not really happy? Are
No.
you saying her happiness is fake?
I'm not. I
Thanks, John.
believe you are truly happy.
Do
And
you think she'll need to change fundamentally who she is as a person when we're talking about the next life in order to get that happiness that you're bringing to the
I
table?
believe the Christian doctrine that sexual expression should only be between a man and a woman. But that's not.
and good for you, honestly.
That's great.
But it is harmful to other people because
push it on everybody else.
That means that they don't get to express love in the way that, well, I don't know what your relationship is like, but in the way that their heterosexual counterparts are going
Right.
to be able to express love.
An LDS doctrine.
So will Mormon Heavenly Father keep her out of the celestial kingdom if she continues to have gay relationships?
He's not.
Wait, I asked him.
I am saying that
This is a good moderator.
Shut up, Card.
Yes or no? That's a yes or no.
do I believe that Heavenly Father would keep her out of the celestial kingdom if she
If she
decides not?
continues to have lesbian relationships
Yes.
through her entire life and doesn't repent for them,
Yes, I believe that.
I mean, he's
Yes,
honest.
but-
It's a simple
but
answer.
he'll keep her out of heaven. Celestial
No.
kingdom. Celestial kingdom.
No.
Celestial kingdom.
Yes, we all
Tip
have a
top.
standard
Yeah.
that we need
She
to
won't be
live
able to live with her family forever, which is the
Or with
Mormon
a spouse.
promise.
No, but that's
Because-
that's
because-
abuse of the doctrine of eternal family.
Hold on. Keep going.
I mean, yes.
I like this guy.
Hell yeah.
Get this guy into some presidential debates.
Shut the
because
hell up,
those
Cardin.
moderators get walked all over. This
yeah.
guy's not about it.
I believe Jesus is clear in the scriptures that there is a certain way to be able to return to the Father. And
that Jesus, though?
we have to be willing to sacrifice everything. He says that we need to lay down our lives, deny ourselves.
See, from a therapeutic perspective, I can see this from an empathetic standpoint of he truly believes this. And think about, because a lot of people are going to be annoyed with him, and I can foresee that right now. Think about what it means for him in his life journey at this point if he were to change his mind. Because he's now in a relationship with a woman. He's sealed in the temple. He has complete, full church attendance, likely. He can participate in all the temple activities. He has all of the Mormon world technically at his disposal because he's not participating in same-sex attraction. He's not acting on same-sex attraction. And it would cost him everything that he believes, that he's worked for, that he's worked to maintain, that he's found a spouse that will support him in this, which is rare. He's found all of that. And if he does not maintain this rigid belief system, then all of this has been for nothing.
Yeah.
And that's a lot to lose. So I can see his rigid commitment to this because I have sacrificed. I am doing things that could be making me happier, but I'm choosing not to because I believe that this is the way that Jesus told me to do things. And that is a lot to give up. And it is a devastatingly extra element of deconstruction for somebody who believed this thing this rigidly to then realize that you don't believe that anymore and how much time I've wasted not being with somebody that I truly loved, not being with somebody that I truly cared about. So I have a lot of compassion for him because he has a lot to lose if he does not maintain his rigidity.
A whole lot. It brings up the memory of, I had this Sunday school teacher when I was, I think, 15 or 16, and he had a brother who did all the same things. They were from Idaho. So they really similar to Utah Mormons. Went on a mission, got married in the temple, had several kids. And then one day, because he was gay, he's born like that, he was like, I can't do it anymore. And he left. And they got divorced. And it ruined their family. And I truly hope that he still loves his brother regardless. But the way he told this story, it seemed like there was a lot of disdain for his brother. And his brother did not ask to be put in that position. The church, over years and years, conditioned him to believe that him not living authentically and loving someone who he didn't truly love and wasn't truly compatible with, he just couldn't do it. He was a victim of that. And it's really sad to see that entire family had been destroyed because of that.
Follow him in order to go to heaven. And whether you believe it's the celestial kingdom or heaven or whatever it is, there is a standard that we need to live by.
That standard, it also applies to several other religions.
There was another thing that I wanted to bring up just real quick. Sorry for pausing.
God, we're an hour in and we're 15 minutes into this.
There's a lot. It's dense.
Oh my God.
It's dense. But I do remember listening to this one talk while I was a missionary by Apostle Jeffrey R. Holland, who brought up, so I see where they're coming from on this, because he brought up that Jesus said, or that it's not an easy gospel to follow.
Yeah.
It never was meant to be easy, and he quotes Jesus saying, if your right eye offends thee, pluck it out. Like, just to kind of make a visceral illustration as to the lengths that people are supposed to go to follow this gospel. And it's really hard for me to be able to, God, my brain is on slow mode right now.
Well, yeah, it's the end of the day.
It's really hard to be able to reconcile the fact that there are people out there who go to this church who are just like piled on with extra trials for whatever reason, like, and trials that they can't even control. Anyway, it's just really disappointing because you can't argue with that.
No.
It's a trump card, really, because they will just say, well, Jesus forgives all. He made the ultimate sacrifice and felt all of those pains. So ultimately, it'll just be okay. Whatever. Doesn't matter.
Don't want that to get confused that it's specifically our Mormon
Well,
religion.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. It's several other religions. It's not just
Just
us.
because
This
just
panel
belief,
is
it doesn't
about
mean
the
it's
LDS
right.
Church.
What
though.
aboutism?
We definitely can talk about the issues with the LDS Church.
There's two ways to be accepted in the Mormon Church if you're gay. You either can be celibate or you can enter into a mixed orientation marriage. And I can tell you that there's like a
Not great
70%
options.
divorce rate for mixed orientation marriages.
That's
Let me
not
just
true.
finish.
Anecdotally, as a therapist, that is what I see. I have yet, and obviously people are coming to me because they're struggling with things or they want to improve in their lives. But anecdotally, what we see in this realm is that these marriages are not successful. They're not. And that's just statistics. That's not even bias. That's just the numbers here.
It is true.
That is not true.
So I have a PhD in clinical and counseling psychology. I interviewed 1,612 LGBT Mormons and ex-Mormons, and this is based on my published research data. And let me just finish. So you have one choice, which is to be in a mixed orientation marriage where 70% are going to fail and you're going to be likely miserable, or you can be celibate, and believe it or not, being celibate has worse.
Timber, he's
Like I
talking
said,
numbers.
he's committed.
You cannot argue with
Depression, anxiety, and mental health outcomes as someone who's in a mixed orientation marriage. And that
Isolation. Truly
Yeah.
being celibate and not being able to be with anybody. That there's a reason why people go towards mixed orientation marriages, because at least I have a partner. At least I have somebody who I can come home to every night and talk to. But at the end of the day, that's still not the person that you truly, really want to be with. You can still love that person, care for that person, or even be best friends. Like a lot of these relationships that
children.
we see are like, we have children, we're really good friends, we love each other, and we care about each other, but there's just no, like, sexual compatibility isn't there. I'm not physically or sexually attracted to you. Our emotional intimacy is very much based in parenthood and not love or, so there's lots to lack there, but that often seems better than just living your life alone.
That's why so many LGBTQ Mormons choose death.
And if you want personal, I'll give you personal. I am married to a man who used to be married to a woman, an amazing, amazing woman who God definitely had me find because of the situation that I had. I was able to have 2 biological children with this woman, and there is no way I believe in a God that is going to take away my husband and my 2 biological children that he absolutely gave me. I have them, I love them, and I will have them forever.
I think statistics are very important.
I wanna hear
I'm
Kwaku on
very
this one.
curious. Would you say you're happier now than before?
Yes. Because my joy,
And ultimately,
He probably truly believes that.
yeah, and I love that for him. But it is not everybody's experience.
Again, we don't want to impose on other
Yeah.
people.
I'm glad that he's happy. I hope that he's happy the rest of his life. I wish no ill will.
the joy that I feel in Christ is so much deeper than the emotional, physical connection that I had with my boyfriends. It doesn't compare.
I have so much joy in Christ right now.
Can I just interject?
Let's just. And we can.
It's an
So that might
interesting
be the
perspective.
only Mormon who didn't step forward. I think 2 things can be true at once. So, obviously,
Is he going to take the contrarian
Shocking
route?
take from Kwaku right here. Okay.
Okay.
members of the church, by and large, are good people who don't hate
I generally agree.
anyone. But at the same time, we got to be realistic. Gay people aren't going anywhere, and Mormons aren't going anywhere. So, what do you do?
That's true.
And the future of LGBT relations and the church, I'm excited to see what happens, because clearly something's going to happen. Something's going to have to change, because these are 2 groups that are not leaving.
Masturbation is.
See, and I don't see that happening truly. I don't, with Mormonism, the way it sits with the leadership that's currently up to bat, not even the ones that are currently swinging, but the ones that are steadying up to be prophet, I don't see that changing anytime soon. I really don't, because I think the membership view might change with time, but I don't think, unless the leadership is going to get on board, you're SOL. And even when they're doing surveys and things and trying to like peruse members and try to figure out their stances on things, like they just come down harder. Like they canonized the family proclamation not that long ago. And that is the document that says that literally men, women, marriage only, no exceptions, traditional gender roles, period. No, like this is a document that we kind of believe in. This is canon here.
Yeah.
And we believe this 100%. And so I just don't see that happening. I see membership potentially changing their views, but I don't see the church shifting to accommodate that. No. I would love to have seen that one.
Women and men are equal in the church. Agreeers, please step forward.
Agree.
Hardin seems like he had a...
Hardin's hesitating here.
This is one of the most.
But let me tell you why he's hesitating. He's going to do the men and women are like different but similar. They have divine roles that each of them fulfill that the other one cannot do, which is why they have different roles, but it means that they're very similar. I've heard all these arguments before. I'm a woman in the church, and this was part of my shelf breaking. So I've heard all this shit before.
Doctrines of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is there's no other church or religion on the earth that teaches that men and women eventually can become gods, co-creators, and co-equal partners. I mean, we
yeah, but what's my role? So let's theorize for a minute. They're trying to abandon the whole you get your own planet theology, but we know it's there. So if I theoretically get to the celestial kingdom, do all the things right, get my own planet, and we get to be God and goddess together, or however they would like to label it, they probably don't like that word, then what is my job? My job is just to pop more kids out.
Spiritually.
I gotta populate my planet. Okay? So tell me how that's better.
We're venturing into discontinued ideas here, Jordan.
We are, and people are gonna be mad about it, but like collab is still out there. But that's what I'm saying is like this whole idea of we're equal is I would be able to have the choice, be like, I don't want kids. I don't want to have kids. And that's not an option for women in the church.
We just want to have our own planet to chill on, and
that's not acceptable.
Yeah, celestial law seems to dictate that that's not allowed.
That's not
I
okay.
believe currently that we are co-equal partners already.
What do you call that?
Delusion?
What do you call two gods with no kids and celestial income? Dinks, but they're God.
Different responsibilities, but we both have the same ability to become kings and queens, priests and priestesses. And
but the role of kings and queens are not the
I
same.
believe that men and women in the church are equal, but I think it's important to define what equal is, because I'm immediately aware of what the secular anti-Mormon arguments are.
Oh, here we go. Secular
He's already
anti-Mormon.
predicated. Oh, yeah, this is the wrong way of thinking. Let me tell you the right way.
Notice 2 Mormons set this one out.
At our faith, and we're a faith that has codified this idea, as the Apostle Paul said, that we will be co-participants in his glory. And we have a relief society, which is the largest women's organization.
Buddy, the question was, are women and men equal in the church?
I hate it when
not
people...
in your concept of heaven.
It drives me nuts.
That doesn't matter in this conversation because I don't believe in that.
It drives me nuts when people use the relief society as a way of saying that men and women are equal. Because, okay, so we have a room that all the women get to go to on Sunday. Okay, like, yeah, I'd rather be with the women in the church than I would be with the men. So, like, that's fair. But again, women only have limited leadership. Women in Relief Society, even the Relief Society presidency, are overseen by the bishopric. So they're overseen by men. They can have ideas and they can take them to the bishopric, but guess who's going to say yes or no? Guess who's going to count the money? Guess who's going to say how much money they get? Guess who's going to approve the activities? Guess who's going to say, yes, you can do this, no, you can't do this, or maybe don't talk about that on Sunday, but this one you could talk about. Like, all of that comes from the men. So that's not equality there. I have to seek permission. I have to seek permission to do these things. And so that's not equal. And just because you give women a place to be in the same building doesn't mean we're at the table. That means we're in the building. We're in another room. You guys are sitting there having conversations about important church leadership things, but where are the women?
Yep. Just to drive that point home, if the bishop presides over the Sunday meetings, if the bishop is not there, then the first counselor presides over the meetings. if the first counselor isn't there, then it's the second counselor. Then you go down through the bishop. If nobody's there, you would get to the leader of the high priest group. If there are no high priests there, you would go down to the elders quorum president and all the elders. And then from there, you would go to the, I don't remember what the leader of the priests is. And then all the children, priesthood holders, but you never, ever, ever would have a Relief Society
So
president.
here's your thing then. So
presiding.
you either have a 13-year-old that's up at the pulpit in
Yeah.
charge with all the
Of
adult
all
women
women.
in the audience, or you have a nuclear holocaust that somehow only kills all the men, and then you would have women in leadership positions in the church with leadership positions that equate
Because
to
it
the
would-
same responsibilities as men. Because Mormons will say, well, there aren't women in leadership positions. There's a general Relief Society presidency, all this shit. No, they don't have the same responsibilities. They do not have the same abilities. They do not have the same permission-giving authority over other people. So
Who sets the budget for the Relief Society?
women can't even count the money. Hello?
In the world, we're one of the only faiths that's mainstream or large enough to have national recognition that I know of that has a doctrine of Heavenly Mother that is actually sung about in our official...
Very controversial, by the way.
Sung about?
You're not even allowed to pray to her, Cardin.
You don't even know her name.
You're not even allowed to talk to her, really.
book. You look at women, they don't need to receive the priest.
I would love to know which hymn he is talking about because
Heavenly Parents, I'm sure.
very
I'm sure it's just the references
obscure
to I have heavenly
references.
parents who
Yeah.
love me, blah, blah, blah.
In order to go to the temple, they, we're told our priesthood as men that we hold is useless unless it's applied through long suffering and patience. And we're constantly told that you are living the Adam and Eve archetype. And unless you make a decision mutually with your wife, which is the ultimate definition of equality, it's what we call unrighteous dominion.
And this drives me nuts, too, because Eve is the only reason that Mormons are where they are. Because Adam didn't have the balls to do what he needed to do, so Eve took the reins. So really, if we're following the Adam and Eve archetype, no, we're really not. Because if that was the case, women would have
The
more
ladies
say and
would
more
be in
positions of
charge.
power. Yeah.
because Eve was the one who was able to see through all of everything, through the 2 commandments that they were given, into the grand purpose that they were supposed to serve, and was able to put it together.
I'm very aware that some people say, oh, because women can't have the priesthood, that you're a second-class citizen. And there's some cultural arguments that people might try and bring in, but in the codified faith, women enjoy, sometimes will complain about almost preferential treatment.
What,
Beg your
Cardin?
pardon?
What are you talking about? Who?
I just would like to mention that the only 2 people who think that women are equal in the church are men.
Are men. Thank you. Even the Mormon
Does
woman
anyone
sat
know
that one out.
who
Even
the
Quaker.
Relief Society president is? Like, can you name the woman that
general-
is the Relief Society president over the whole church?
Silence.
Not
I
even the
know it was
smug
Jean B.
Cardin.
Bingham. I don't know who it is right now. I'll be honest with you.
I definitely think that men and women are.
I knew it was
treated
June Bingham,
very
but she's
That
differently.
said, I can't name
Wait,
the
wait,
12
wait,
apostles.
wait, wait.
What?
I can name the 12 apostles because they're all men and they're drilled into my head. I can't name the women because you guys don't give a shit who they are.
I can't name the 12 apostles, so
And yet you could name probably the first 3, President Nelson and his counselors.
I would hope, Cardin.
I could name the prophet, yes, but at any given time, I confess.
Let's stay on track. Let's stay on track.
You have a freaking church podcast and you're going to sit here and
Why?
tell me you wouldn't know? Okay,
That,
Cardin.
yeah, maybe.
Contrarian.
Let's stay on track.
I do not think men and women are treated equally, and it goes beyond the priesthood. It also goes to your duties as a woman. I think a lot of the time women are told, I mean, a lot of women go to BYU or college just to find a spouse. And they're told
That
not
MRS.
to continue their education
Indeed.
once they get married and to let the man take over and be the main breadwinner. So
Are you okay,
I
Cardin?
think that there is a difference between the duties.
I hope that's just
men and
handy
women.
editing.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I think that's just a general critique
polite.
of Judeo-Christian traditional household standards, I guess, or customs. I do believe women have been marginalized, and men have asserted their authority and power over them in unrighteous ways and unrighteous dominion, right?
John looks like he's
I
going to
think that
explode.
has definitely changed, especially like not to get into the specifics of the.
Why are they
He's
putting,
like, why are we letting these
why
people
are they
talk?
putting the tallest people on the ends where they have to shoot their cameras over their shoulders?
Temple,
question.
But the temple used to say that women are basically subject to their husbands and have access to God through their husband.
And they would veil their faces as well.
That's not there anymore. And
Yep.
I think that is a positive step that the church is coming to acknowledge that, hey, if Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother,
Oh man, I don't have to hide my face from you so you don't have to look at my ugly ass in the temple anymore. Oh man, thank you for that. That's so helpful to me. And that is like 5 seconds of the temple ceremony that happens. And I actually really enjoyed that part because I could just kind of like sit there and zone out for a second without people looking at me. So that was
our
just fun.
co-creators, co-gods, she's not subject to Heavenly Father.
In Judaism, really quickly, women can be rabbis. And I don't know if within the next
Depending
decade.
depending on the sect.
Sure. I can't see women being bishops.
Personally, when I go to my church,
Absolutely
when I'm
not.
in my ward, when I come to church, I sit down. Everybody leading the church is a male, and the only female you'll see on the stand, she is playing the organ. And when she's not playing the organ, she comes back down and she'll sit with her family.
Absolutely. And there was a big whole to-do recently about some men who got upset that women were sitting on the stand for some reason.
Yeah.
And so this is not just like in name only. This is like all around. This is symbolic. This is intentional. This is woven into doctrine. This is justified with scripture. Like there is no escaping this part of Mormonism. There's not. And that's why there were only 2 frickin' people who I'll use my words wisely, who believe that because they're lost in the misogynist sauce because they have nothing to lose by continuing to believe that men and women are equal in the church. Like, and even just on a biological basis, we're not, because men don't have to be subjected to having children. Women do. So if we're just using the binary terms that Mormonism uses, right? But like, you cannot, like, it boggles my mind again how deeply indoctrinated you have to be and how deeply I don't care about anybody else you have to be to think that this is accurate.
Is that why I want to know why you chose to stay back, because I thought that was very significant.
Because I agree. I don't believe they're equal. Like just like what I said, she goes up, she plays the organ, she comes back down, and all you're left with is men until other women come up later on to bear their testimony or sing something.
How have you felt your involvement has been as a woman?
My involvement, I was involved in the youth. I was like a secretary, only
Fitting.
secretary of the women's, obviously. Sometimes we get combined with the men, but oftentimes
There is no intermingling of roles.
Yeah. And the critics of whatever she's about to say will be like, oh, she doesn't even remember the calling that she had. Oh, well, she probably isn't a real Mormon and she probably wasn't really doing her calling.
it's kind of you kind of stay in your own sex group. So you're always with women, and the men are always with the men, the boys are with the boys, the girls are with the girls, unless you're like adolescents, and obviously they're all together. But I feel that there is definitely segregation within women and men in the church. I do believe that they hold more power. I feel like it's not as inclusive as it should be.
So it seems
What is
like
Quaker's
both
face
sides
right now?
can agree that, you know, the debate is on whether it's unequal or not, but they do have different roles and responsibilities. In that instance,
I think that-
I would like to speak on
did that
that.
impact whether you left or not?
I think it did impact my involvement in the church in general, because
Yeah, I feel like the ladies need to be the ones speaking.
So why are any of the men talking right
the way
now?
that you're
honestly?
explaining it is like a kid can sit in church and see who is in charge. A child can. Even being raised, becoming a teenager, you were only involved with the women. Even be like all of these levels, all the way up to a level of an adult, of being married, of you can only practice your sexuality once you're married to a man. Only can you have sexual relationships once you're married to a man. Like, it's very clear that we as women are seen very differently. And not only that, but even the concept of a heavenly mother that we talk about, they just told us that we're not allowed to pray even to a heavenly mother. We're not even allowed
Thank
to.
you.
It's not brought up, we don't talk about it. And that just so clearly displays.
That really flies in the face of what Timber was saying regarding co-gods, co-creators, because co-god and co-creator implies that there is
Equality.
equal say in all the things. They have equal responsibilities, not that one is above the other.
And
which
remember,
is exactly what we were seeing when we were Mormons.
And what we're generally told, Heavenly Mother was a big part of my deconstruction as a Mormon. And what we're told about Heavenly Mother, especially when you inquire or when you start to pursue or ask more, a lot of the times the perception is, well, we don't know a lot about Heavenly Mother. We don't know a lot about her role or the things that she does other than her just like being a loving mother, because her role is like so special and she is so fragile that Heavenly Father protects her to like an insane degree. And so,
she's like this fragile little
right, she's
flower.
just this fragile
she
little
has
flower.
To be protected. She can't protect herself.
And it's not about that at all. It's not about that at all. And I didn't realize this until I started my deconstruction process, obviously, but it's about women thinking that they can have any sense of semblance of power in the church, because you can't pray to Heavenly Mother because that means that she would be an all-powerful, all-knowing being. And the only person who has that ability is Heavenly Father. And so we can't give women and men any hope that women would be even on the same level as Heavenly Father, because then that would give them the idea that they have some power here. And that's not what we want.
Yeah.
So they're always going to shut that down. They're always going to shut it down. And if you get like, even for people, like I've heard people who pray like specifically like instead of Heavenly Father, which is how you're supposed to do it, they'll say Heavenly Parents, and they get disciplined. They're not allowed to speak in church anymore. They're not allowed to pray in church anymore. They get a talk from their bishop. Like I've seen it time and time again. So they reinforce this very heavily.
The difference of we only speak to God the Father. We don't speak to God Mother. We don't talk about her. And what's funny is it's all of the white men who are telling us why. It's always the white men who are telling us where our level is. It's the white men who are saying, oh no, you have your priesthood, but you can't sit on the stand, you can't pass the sacrament, you can't bless people, can't baptize people.
I'm sorry, but that is a Judeo multiracial biblical teaching that wasn't just instituted by white men. That you may disagree with it, and that's fine.
Sexist nonetheless.
You may disagree with it, but
it's on its face.
The fact of the matter is that there always is someone who presides, okay? And the scriptures say that the one who presides.
So why can't it be a woman?
The man, even in the home, like people don't understand how deep this goes. You have, like, men have to preside in their home. This is not even like you just learn about this in church and this is just a church topic. No, they say this shit in your house. Like, men preside in your home. They make the decisions. You go to them. They have the last word, period. That's enforced even in your relationship and in your home. And so this is not just like a random, like, oh, well, like all religions do this. No, Mormonism even has it, like they have a monopoly on men's illusion of power even in your freaking home.
The household is the man, but presiding doesn't mean is higher than, okay, or has more
Highly
power.
disagree.
It certainly does.
It literally does.
That literally means, that's like me saying, you know what, Joe Biden, I think that we're going to do this, and you know what, you're not higher than me.
Like, okay.
It means the husband has to ensure that the needs of the household are taken care of spiritually and temporally. And he works with his wife
why can't she do that?
But it doesn't mean he has more power over her.
Jillian's going to explode.
I'm actually curious to hear his thoughts.
This little conversation right here is a microcosm of my Mormon experience, which is it's men having the power, men dominating the conversation, and then telling women why they're more important while they're mostly
100%.
When you were speaking about Heavenly
Like the fact
Mother,
that men are talking more in this conversation is just the perfect demonstration of this in fact in point. And it's women can't even have their opinions because it's my job to preside over you and tell you what's wrong.
Oh, well, it's not like just white men that were doing it. This is like a multiracial,
Well, all men can be sexist regardless of race. Hello.
when I first was speaking with the missionaries and learning more about the church, obviously you're always talking about Jesus Christ and the Heavenly Father and all of the Holy Ghost and all these things. And I don't know where, but I was thinking about it, I came across it, and I was like, well, I wanted to learn more about Heavenly Mother, and it was probably a 1.5 minute conversation because, we don't know anything about Heavenly Mother. I was like, well, why do we know all these things and we don't know anything about Heavenly Mother? I was like, she should be equally important. I mean, she birthed the person we worship, so I just, I couldn't fathom how we knew little to nothing about Heavenly
It's not
Mother.
even that we speak less of her, it's we don't speak
of her.
At all.
Yeah, we're not allowed to. We're not even allowed to pray to her.
Well, I would, just because you're not allowed to pray to something other than And by the way, not allowed, I think that's misrepresentation too. You have free agency, you can do whatever you want, but just because we don't have codified prayer.
You have free agency, but if you do it, then your
This is
bishop's
the
going to
sub-
yell at you. So like, what are you saying?
This is what people would be like, oh, you're Mormon, you can't drink. And I would be like, well, I could drink
if I wanted to,
but
I have free agency.
I would have to suffer the consequences. So he's saying, oh, you have free agency, but you may suffer discipline from the church if you do.
To somebody other than our Father in heaven doesn't mean that we hate, like,
But the prophet told us
saint.
not to. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Jesus-
I actually got a question.
Straight up. I mean, straight up. They're like going back to the beginning of this conversation. The debate is over. The prophet has spoken on the issue, period, point blank.
For you. I got a question for you girls.
Oh boy. Calling them girls. These are women, Cardin.
Buddy.
The division, okay, so this always atrophies into a priesthood argument.
No, it doesn't.
But do you think it's possible to have equality with a division of labor? Or would equality be achieved in your mind with women receiving the priesthood? And then I have a follow-up. This just came into my mind. This isn't a gotcha. But what
It's
would
an interesting question. I'll give him that.
Is he setting up the idea that he's using gotchas all the time? This
Literally.
isn't a gotcha.
That's what I do on my
That is
podcast,
funny.
but not here.
Your definition of equality? Must the women be given the priesthood and that's the hill we're dying on here? Or is there
brother.
any other definition that would satisfy you?
Well, in the
If he thinks this is just about the priesthood, he hasn't been listening this whole fucking time.
no, and he's like, oh well, this always atrophies into a conversation about the priesthood because that is where
It's the hallmark.
it's stemming from, essentially.
But it's not the only part of this.
It's not the only part, but essentially, people were given the priesthood, or they, made it up. Joseph.
But the
And
priesthood
then-
sets the tone for everything else,
I know,
right?
but those people were emboldened by the priesthood.
Yeah.
They were endowed with that power from God to be able to make the choices.
Well,
And
that's
to
the problem.
Set up the thing.
Because he's talking about how it always stems that way, but you're right. Because that's the power structure. That's the hierarchical institution that we have here. Because it's not just that men have the power because they're men. It's men have the power because they have the priesthood and they're men. Yeah. And so, like, you're not going to be able to really separate that argument. But if he wants to sit here and have a conversation about it, I mean, we
That
can
is
just
the
talk
only
about
issue.
we can just talk about division of labor. We can just talk about household responsibilities. I mean, there is nobody that I've worked with more so than Mormons. And obviously I work with a lot of Mormon people, but there is nobody who struggles with the concept of like emotional labor and balance in household responsibilities than Mormon people. I tell you. And there are no women who are more overworked and underpaid and underrecognized and underappreciated and undergiven like normal human needs, like attending to the fact that they need breaks and they need time away from their children and all of those things. And this applies to like religious women across the board. But speaking as a therapist who works with a lot of Mormon people, like that is consistently what I see. There is a consistent imbalance of household responsibilities. And a lot of times we have to break through this whole like priesthood expectation. I'm the man, I work all day nonsense in order to get to a place where we can actually talk about balancing. And so, yes, a lot of this stems from the priesthood, but it infiltrates in so many other ways that they don't even realize.
Well, and I mean, just to drive the point home, they talk about how important women are in General Conference, and in May for Mother's Day, they go down to the hardware store and get a couple trays of chrysanthemums or whatever the fuck is in blooming at the time. And that's like, from my experience, that's kind of it.
And they're very, like, my point being as a therapist who works with Mormon people, they're perfectly capable. Like, if you can get to a place where you have a conversation about, like, hey, it's not about, like, who's, like, more important. It's not about the fact that you work all day. If we can just get to a point where we can recognize and appreciate each other's emotional and physical and domestic labor and look at it in the same terms instead of you do the housework and I work.
I do the real work.
I do the real work. My work matters more. Like, when we can move past that, Mormons are just as easily able to divide house labor equally and work together as a team. Yeah. And there is nothing that it like predisposes them to not being able to do this well. But this is a really nice anchor for people to hold on to so they never have to get to that point. Because when we start having that conversation, that means I have to do more work as a dude. That means I might have to pull my own weight around instead of just not doing anything.
Yeah.
And so it's beneficial to them to continue to maintain the power structure as it sits right now.
I think just being able to see at least one woman up there leading the congregation for at least half of the
Well,
church
define
time.
leading. Like
could agree with
what's
that.
Having an important job other than
I think
playing
the women
organ.
are only allowed
Teachings.
to be leaders of the women, whereas the men can be leaders of both men and women
Lead
above all.
the church.
So if women could have higher up roles where they are given more responsibility and more people in the congregation to care for and look after and given more
Positions of power.
positions of
Something
power.
equivalent to the
Yeah.
priesthood. Maybe
Okay.
not the priesthood, but at least equivalent.
so then what would you call
Like, this is an awful example because of the job or the calling title, but why does ward's secretary in the bishopric have to be a man? What about being the secretary of which is the guy who basically is in charge of the bishop's calendar and is in charge of taking attendance, doing all the numbers, and handling the tithes when they come in and counting them? Why does that have to be a man?
Why does he get the label executive secretary, but when women are secretaries, they're just secretaries?
Yeah, ward executive secretary.
Like, for example, Sister Espinaus. I can't name the heads of the Relief Society, but the young women I can because I'm a little bit more aware of
hip
it
like
because I have
that.
children that are youth. But Sister
just 'cause he has
Espinaus, Emily
kids.
Bell Freeman, all of these women that have
Emily Bell Freeman is an influencer, by the way. She probably needs her own video at one point.
She
This is a total like different path, and if you're still here, God bless you. But my theory is that Al Fox Caraway is as diehard as she is because she wants to be the influencer that becomes in the Relief Society or in the Young Women's Presidency, because that's what happened to Emily Bell Freeman, and I think that's what she's trying to do because she is absolutely intoxicating about it, and so I think that's the path that she's trying to take.
Okay.
So there's something to be said about us talking about influencers and their role in the church, and like, oh, let's have Emily Bell Freeman, the influencer who's like hip and cute and the kids like her, let's have her step into that position. Like, interesting, right?
If they're going to be really stepping down about the tattoos thing, that is the path that they should
That
take.
is the path to take.
Although that would be,
A hell of a path.
wildly powerful positions within the Church of Jesus Christ of
Al Fox
Oh my
Caraway
God.
is the tattooed Mormon, by the way. Just
Yeah.
context.
that have wildly powerful positions within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day
what?
Saints. I mean, Emily Bell Freeman is probably one of the single most powerful Mormons in the world. I would say if she put something out on
What?
Beg your pardon?
God, Nelson's gonna have a freaking seizure over that. What did you just
Be
say?
for real. Be for real.
Instagram, it'd probably have almost as much pull as Russell M. Nelson.
This is also the thing because they simultaneously want to be like, whoa, the church, it's a global church. We have temples all over the world. But at the same time, he thinks that the world is the United States and people who speak English.
in the Pacific Northwest and this side of the Rockies. So
Okay, so what he's talking about is influence. Carden is talking about influence. Emily Bell Freeman, because of her platform, probably has more influence than your average church leader. Okay?
Yeah.
But that does not equate
Among-
to power.
Yeah.
Power and influence are not the same thing. Sometimes they
They're
go
not.
hand in hand, but they are not the same.
if we were to give just women the priesthood magically all of a sudden right now, it seems like these arguments kind of come from a politically secular leftist stance.
Oh my God, Carden, what? I guarantee
could
you this
never
Mormon girl
have
is
a
not
conversation with this guy.
leftist.
Like representation, which I get, I understand. Movies are cooler when you see somebody that looks
Quaco's
like
really
you in it. I
quiet,
get that.
unless this is just
But
editing.
then would you want to preach from a Bible that's almost written wholly and completely by men? At that point, would the demands of equality require that we have equal representation in the books? There's only one book of Esther. Now we'll take one book
Well, that is a conversation that probably needs to be had now, isn't it, Carden?
And there's only 3 named women in the Book of Mormon.
And one of them's a harlot.
out of the Septuagint and ignore the Book of Mormon because there's not a single one that's written by a woman. Like, I don't see.
This is black and white
unless
thinking,
we
by the way.
accept the dichotomy that there can be equality with a division of labor. I don't see where it ends even after.
Okay, this is my soapbox, and I teach this to couples all the time. Division of labor does not have to be equal in order to be balanced. To say that division of labor in any couple, in any scenario, will be 100% equal all of the time is simply unattainable. And this is why they use this argument. Because they say, well, it'll never be equal. Well, we'll never be able to do it.
Well, we
It'll
might
never
as well not
happen.
do anything,
So we might as well just
it'll
not
never
fucking
be-
do it.
Never be equal.
And that's their whole thing is I can still maintain the power structure by arguing that it'll never be this way. When the reality of it is, yes, it's never going to be 100% equal because you're not working the same job and spend every second of your day doing the same exact fucking thing. Like, okay, hello, obviously. What we're aiming for is balance here. We're aiming for balance. It's not going to be 100% equal all of the time, and that's okay, but we're aiming for balance. It's not, I come home and sit on my ass and watch TV and watch my wife do everything else 100% of the time. It's, oh, I can take a break when I come home and then I'll do dinner while my wife gets the kids ready for bed. Or I can step in these ways so we have a more balanced equation instead of my wife doing all of the work when it comes to raising our children. So, like, again, they've just created this narrative that allows them to be able to maintain this power structure in a way where it's like, well, it's impossible. Like, will you just never listen to men ever again then? It's just you can only listen to women all the time. Like, it's so irrational. And they do that because they're afraid. And they want to maintain things the way that they are.
Oh, it's like the liberals. Where does it end?
Yeah.
Where does it end? Does everything have to be equal all the time? Do we have to have? Did the boys' knife always also have to be the girls' knife? Like,
literally, it's everything. They do this with everything.
After giving women the priesthood, and this is an honest question.
I think it's even taking a bigger step back from even just having a position of power. But like, first of all, yes, I do think that women should be able to be a position of power. It is the whole doctrine of the church that how women are seen and how they were treated. It's bigger than just a position. It's how they are treated. It's like these are their responsibilities. This is the woman's responsibility. In the doctrine of the family proclamation, it says very clearly what a woman's job is and what a man's job is. And guess who wrote that? Bunch of white men. Did any of the women get to write that or present it?
As an amicus brief, too.
The men did. Do women get to even be a prophet? No, there's never been a woman prophet. And so we always have these assumptions, but it really is how women are treated in general and how they are seen of their position in the church as a whole, not just by, okay, you can be over all the women. Congrats, you have a big Instagram. It's bigger than that.
It's bigger than
okay
that.
for
Thank
the
you.
doctrine
Wow. Jillian, yes.
kill him.
Change.
Kill him, Jillian.
It's okay for doctrine to change. This is interesting.
There's scriptural precedent for it changing, and one of the most
Oh, this is very interesting. Let's just ponder this for a second.
Christ of Latter-day Saints.
I'm glad to see Kwaku on the agree.
Same,
Side of this
honestly.
Is the fact that we have and rely upon modern prophets, and we take what they say seriously and look forward.
It's okay for
We
the doctrine
have
to change
and
as
rely
long
upon modern prophets,
as they're
but we don't take everything they say uncritically.
as long as the caveat for the Mormons with this is going to be very simple. It's okay for the doctrine to change as long as it's the prophets that are saying so. As long as it's not a social movement, as long as it's not social pressure to do something different.
It's not a woman, even though that is essentially when the big things happen. That's why doctrine changes.
Yep.
But that's a conversation for another
To
time.
that prophetic revelation, but at the end of the day, we still have to go home and get that same revelation. We have to get that same answer from God directly from Him that dovetails with that revelation so that we know in our core that that is what God wants for His children. We don't have a static God.
I disagree there because God is unchangeable, as it states in the scriptures. There are eternal principles that are eternal. They never change. But how those principles are applied can change over time. But the eternal principles remain the same.
See, that's just mumbo jumbo for sometimes it depends.
Really a lot of words to say.
Period. If we don't have any objective, solid, eternal truth, then everything is relative, and relativity leads to chaos.
We're talking about understanding God and eternal principles. I mean, we're talking about cosmic law, multi-dimensions, everything so expansive. And
Cosmic law?
all that information.
The multiverse lives on through.
I suppose.
Part of it is being channeled through the mind
The
of
Mormon
fallible
multiverse.
people who are writing things down in a fallible language, being interpreted to people with fallible understanding.
Modern times, you need modern measures. So it's useful that we have
Did she just bring in that Dave Chappelle meme?
I don't know.
prophets on this earth to this day because everything is ever changing. I mean, you look at our language and look at the way it used to be, look how it is now. It's just everybody needs an updated interpretation.
One of my favorite things about the Mormon Church is how much it's changed. And I can think about 3 issues that really troubled me when I was an Orthodox devout member. One was when I went through the temple for the first time and I had to slit my throat as part of
all the Mormons are triggered.
My thumb as a sign to slit my throat as part of a covenant I was making in the temple. I was super glad when I found out they took that.
Just a clarification, this was in the execution of the penalty. You had to pantomime that you were doing that. We talk about this in
we have videos on this if you're curious.
Yeah. Out in 1990. The second was I'm old enough to remember when black Mormons were not allowed to hold the priesthood. They were not allowed to hold certain offices in the church, and when they were kept out of the temple with just basic temple blessings. And I was super happy in 1978 when they allowed black people to be members in full standing. The final one, my grandmother was
I always point out that it's not just black men weren't allowed to have the priesthood. Black women were also not allowed to participate in
temple
activities like going to the temple. And so this is larger than just black men weren't allowed to have the priesthood. Black women were also limited in their membership, even though they weren't allowed to have the priesthood just as women.
And there was to say that there was not a strong, or at least a culture of racism within the church is
bonkers.
Really goofy. Really goofy.
Daughter of a third wife. So I come directly from a polygamous ancestry. And it wasn't until I was 30 or 31 that I found out that the founder of Mormonism, Joseph Smith, married over 30 women, 14-year-olds, other men's wives.
Cardin's heavy breathing over there.
Held for me for 30 years. And
Who's fucking with their
I was
mic?
super happy that over time the church has distanced itself from polygamy, because I think it's one of the most horrendous
on his neck
teachings that the church has ever had. So I'm super grateful the church changes, and it does.
I have to push back because I think there's some things that are misconstrued as doctrine that are policies.
Oh my God,
the doctrine and policy conversation. Oh God, this will follow me to my grave.
And we see that as the church.
Which thing that I just said was a misconstrued?
Blacks not receiving the priesthood.
Oh, that's an immediate red flag right there.
Well, no, but you're saying it was a doctrine that changed.
Well, the first presidency, the prophet and the first and second counselor prior to 1978, on multiple occasions signed statements saying that it was doctrine that black people could not be members in full standing.
If you want to argue with somebody on the historicity of the church, John is not the person to pick. You will not win that fight, my friend. I'm sorry to say. And he probably knows nothing about John because he probably doesn't read anything like perceived as anti-Mormon. But this dude has thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of hours of listening to people's stories and listening to like historical records, history, experts. Like, you can't beat the dude's knowledge.
First presidency in the 1940s and 50s.
Yeah, but that was a corruption of the Joseph.
Why was
God was wrong?
Corrupted?
God was wrong.
Why would God allow that to happen? Because
the Mormons were right and God was wrong.
His mouthpiece in the world was corrupted and leading his children astray, and God did nothing about it.
God was wrong.
For over 100 years, God did nothing about it.
It just boggles my mind that Mormons are okay with this narrative, because that's literally what they're saying. They're saying Mormons didn't want to do this. Mormons didn't want to ban the blacks from having because they say the blacks, like Mormonism and saying blacks instead of black people, like drives me bonkers. But saying like, oh, it was because Mormons wanted to do that, but man, they were just so pressed about it. They were so sad that they had to do it, but God wouldn't let up.
Presidency,
God wouldn't let up.
God didn't want it to happen, and now it's shifted to the first presidency and the prophet. They were corrupted. They didn't do it. How many iterations of prophets and first presidencies did we have before it finally changed?
And there was no hesitation. I mean, there was letters written, there was confirmation from prophet to prophet, from word to word. I mean, there was no discussion about whether or not this was actually a thing.
Baptized free men. He had a presidential platform based upon abolition.
Okay. But prior to, he was not an abolitionist. And then it doesn't even matter because Brigham Young came in and said, nope, we're not doing that. And he moved everybody west, and
Cardin, have you ever
He took his
heard?
own slaves with him.
Have you ever heard
By
about
the
a
way.
thing where like presidential candidates will hop on board to movements or like causes because they want to
what's that
reach their
called?
base?
A bandwagon?
Yeah. Like, I encourage you to read anything about Joseph Smith. Like, even if it's rough stone rolling, even if that's the only thing that you can read about Joseph Smith, like, sit with it and internalize it, because there are some things in there about Joseph Smith that most Mormons will never even begin to comprehend or understand. Yeah. He is not this, like, oh, Joseph loved black. Joseph was racist as hell. Okay? And we've got lots of things to prove it. I've read too many damn books.
Jordan, don't be starting to do your moral relativism. We're not allowed to do that, remember?
Joseph did a lot of things in his life, many, many things that the mainstream Mormon church would absolutely unequivocally not agree with. And so anytime that people use Joseph as like the pinnacle guiding light of Mormonism, it's always an immediate red flag for me, because it's their narrative of Joseph that they've constructed and created, even to the point that we have like, how many versions of the first vision do we have? Because the dude just lies out his ass like nobody's business.
So many.
And so that's what boggles my mind. And it was a big deconstruction thing for me, is like learning the truth about Joseph Smith and like learning his actual life and not just what Mormonism portrays him to be.
And the Mormon church was basically an abolitionist entity that the government feared in the West.
Okay, if they were so abolitionist, how did they end up doubling back on that?
Exactly. And they said they used the same exact argument. This is red flag number 2. They used the same exact argument about polygamy.
Yep.
They say the same thing.
Its first 50 years. The fact that it adopted some bad ideas of the curse of Cain because of Protestant influence coming from the South, especially when Parley P. Pratt returned as a missionary from the South, and the pressures put on Brigham Young as a governor of the state of Deseret, that is an abuse of history.
But it's your prophets, the people that you believe claim.
Yeah. How did Parley P. Pratt end up pressuring the prophet into changing that, and God did not remove him or do anything, really?
It flies in the face of the argument that prophets cannot lead the church astray, because that's what we're constantly taught growing up. Prophets can't lead the church astray. Prophets can't lead the church astray. They'll always be faithful, or else
God would remove them.
God will remove them. And so you always have faith in the prophet.
That's not just me. That is Russell M. Nelson, the current prophet president of the church, who said that to a group of children while sitting in a historical reconstruction of, I can't remember whose home it was, but I can see it in my mind clear as day.
President Nelson, would you ever lead anyone astray?
Oh, no.
That's not what prophets do, is it?
Some of them have said, if the president of the church should ever lead people astray, God would take him away.
Yeah. And
there's no, historically on that one, that was like a few years ago.
Spoke to God and that I used to believe, they're the ones.
So did they
signing
speak to
these
God or not?
It's David O. McKay. It's people that used to stand as prophets and revelators. So how do you know when they're speaking as a man? How do you when they're excluding entire race of people from full participation? How do you know they're speaking for God or speaking for themselves until the social?
I answered that right at the beginning of this whole entire prompt. It's a 2-part path. You receive revelation from a prophet, you go home, you pray about it, you confirm it. Like, I actually really appreciate this question because it gets to the root of epistemology.
Should we let Kwaku answer this?
I think
Kwaku should talk about this.
When
here's my thing, though. I will say as a caveat, Kwaku is the only, it looks like, other than the moderator, person of color here. And so it's fair to say that we shouldn't be putting all the pressure on Kwaku to be like, well, you're the only black guy here. Why don't you talk about it?
Yeah.
You know? And so I don't think he has to be the representation for all black people in the church and their perception of this. But I think if he has things to say, then he should be able to be somebody who gets to speak first in this discussion.
Invariably, it was a policy that would have affected him if it were still in today.
We want our environment and the bubble we're in, because everyone lives in a bubble. We don't want that bubble to change, no matter what. Human beings are prideful. Human beings have ego. Everyone does. I look at some of the things our church leaders said, David O. McKay, right? Brigham Young, Joseph Fielding Smith. I know they weren't, singing Kumbaya with black people. I get that. I totally get that. But at the same time, I understand that people are also products of their environment. And I don't want to condemn someone who's not here to defend themselves. And in the
That,
same,
it's so funny to me because
They
they're like,
return to this a lot.
they're a product of their environment. Oh, so they were influenced by the world that they're living in when they were supposed to be putting that off, and God still put them in a position of power where they could do harm
Well,
with that influence.
Where is the
All right.
conversation about how they speak to God and God gives them the direction? Because again, this flies in the face. Are you a product of your time, or is God speaking to you about the only true things?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter if you were a product of your time or not. God would be telling you, because God doesn't abide by time. And so that would be largely irrelevant here.
way, 100 years from now, someone will look at us and they'll say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you guys were using your Cobalt iPhones built by child slaves. Please don't deny my humanity 100 years from now.
Well, look at a New Testament example, Peter. Peter was the leading apostle during the time of the original apostles, right? And he was making Gentile converts get circumcised. And Paul confronts him to the face, saying that this isn't necessary. So you have disagreement within the apostleship. And
but doesn't the Book of Mormon say that God cursed white people with dark skin for their wickedness? Isn't that?
I mean, yeah, there's that whole logic here we got going on too. So like, where does that come from?
Well, John, it doesn't say that anymore.
Scriptural canon.
it depends
in the
on
Book of Mormon?
it depends on your interpretation.
I've never read it that way.
What's your interpretation?
Well, there's scriptures in the Old Testament where certain individuals say there's a skin of blackness upon me that is totally symbolic.
It's giving,
being
the Bible
in a state of
says,
distress, or
Solomon, I am black but comely.
Okay, then why did they take it out?
I mean,
like if it really
that's
was
the
unproblematic.
nail in the casket. Maybe if they had gone in and retranslated it or whatever, but then at that point they wouldn't be able to say it's the most perfect book that's ever been produced.
And it supports the fact that it's not just a product of the time. This is doctrine. Yeah. This is Book of Mormon. This is what they believed.
So
they weren't
God...
just like, oh, black people, we don't like them. It's like, actually, they're wicked. And so that's beyond just product of your time. So like, which one is it?
Due to the Lamanites in the Book of Mormon, in your interpretation, did he not turn their skin dark because of their wickedness?
I was going to say, Lamanites, hello.
No, I think it was a
Oh, there it is, right there.
Yeah, wherefore, as they were white and exceedingly fair and delightsome, that they might not be enticing unto my people, for the Lord God did cause a skin of blackness to come upon them.
It's not just blackness, skin.
Anybody who is out there saying that this is referring to a spiritual condition is just morally and intellectually bankrupt, and they're banking on you, hoping that you don't see that.
Just like with Cain, we don't know.
But it says skin of blackness in the Book of Mormon. It says skin of blackness.
It's an idiom. There are many idioms.
How do you
exactly.
know?
Exactly.
How do you know?
How are we supposed to interpret that? How would the people of God be able to perceive that so viscerally if it is an idiom?
In the times of the Book of Mormon, were they thinking about idioms? Or were they just like, we talk about how Joseph couldn't even write a goddamn sentence, but now he can draft idioms? Like, which one is it? Is he this lovely, educated schoolboy that we know the whole, like, bullshit thing that
we're alleging that he drafted idioms.
I'm just like, where is it? Where does it end?
That are mistranslated.
Doesn't that feel convenient to call it an idiom?
No,
yes, it does.
It is.
Because you need to.
And when it talks about their dark skin, God made them dark so that they'll be loathsome to the white skin Nephites?
Because if you're a biblical and Greek scholar, you realize there are idioms like this.
The Book of Mormon is not the Bible.
It is not. Period. It is not.
And it's even more ridiculous to think that these people who left Jerusalem supposedly 450 years before Common Era and went to the Americas would have even like similar idioms and things that they did just because they had those same records of the Old Testament or whatever.
Absolutely.
Culturally, they would be different.
Is it okay for the doctrine to change? And I feel like that puts the church into a very precarious situation, especially going back to our last discussion when you said something that's still kind of in my head, the doctrine, the abuse of the doctrine of eternal family. can the doctrine of eternal family, is it okay for the doctrine of eternal family to change within the LDS Church?
Is it okay? Again, I would just say, well, I guess define okay. Is there a scriptural precedent for it? And it could. Yes, absolutely. If a prophet were to come out and say, I've received a revelation from God, and X is going to change, and then he announces it in general conference, and
X is now Twitter.
Timber goes home and pray about it. We realize, okay, cool, this is a revelation from God. It's changing.
What about the families that lost so many sons and daughters to suicide because of that never-changing doctrine of specific eternal families?
The cost is too high. The cost is too high to hope, yes, like Kwaku said at the beginning, yes, let's hope in the future that things will change. But what is the cost of it not changing now? Yeah. And it doesn't go back and bring us back all these children who ended their lives because they felt like that would be better.
Who will.
And the future ones who unfortunately will.
Whatever day that God determines.
And so it's quite, imagine being a parent in that position. It would be quite insulting to see doctrine change like that and be like, oh, so
now you can change
now
it.
Now it's cool.
My kid is now
my kid's gone.
Gets to.
So you're telling me that I just
life.
Needed to have kids later in life, and then maybe they would have survived this? How unfair of a position to be in. Yeah. And that's why I think a lot of times they won't change it, because they know that's the predicament they'll end up in.
Not go to the celestial kingdom because you believe in this. We'll be able to visit you every now and again. We'll have a little family reunion, that kind of thing. But you just can't come in and visit us up there. If that changes, the LDS Church is, they tried to do a little change-a-roo in 2015 where they were
that went poorly.
Children of same-sex households can't get baptized, and that was changed real quick.
Again,
and my
that's
parents, but we're talking about
Would you want me to answer the
lives.
question? Or
yeah,
okay.
Oh, definitely.
So, first off, individually, just man to man, friend to friend. Hopefully we'll become friends.
Penis to penis, let's talk.
If somebody actually said that to you, what you just articulated right there, that is not Christ's doctrine applied through Christ-like love. There's 3 or 4 things that are...
So, Cardin, you're telling me that you didn't support that policy when it came out then?
Because the prophet declared it.
So what
the whole policy versus doctrine thing is just...
It doesn't matter when it's coming through the mouthpiece of God.
Yeah. People are going to treat it with, as if they're hearing it from God, because God is leading his church. Why would he institute a policy that is not supposed to be like that? And if it is the actions of the leaders that he has put in place, why does he not remove them, as many people have said?
Wrong. With what has happened to you guys, if you guys are indeed regurgitating the story the way it happens, and I believe you. So on the individual level, I want to say, I see you, I validate what you've gone through, and my first initial reaction would be to very quickly delineate between the church with a little c and a church with a big C. I will tell you, the church with a big C and its codified doctrines is loving to all, gives an eternal, immeasurable value.
But then that's not Mormonism.
And there are policies that put stipulations on that.
Because if that's what Cardin talks about this, but what he's talking about, I don't think is a Mormonism that he would belong to.
Yeah, I don't know.
Truly. That's
Only
the thing
he can
here.
answer that truly.
But if you sit down and ask, if you sat 1 million Mormons in a room and were like, hey, is this policy or doctrine? You're going to get 1 million different answers. You might have a majority, but everything, you can't constantly be telling people, I am the prophet of God. I'm a prophet. I'm a seer. I'm a revelator. I speak to God. Everything that I tell you, I will never lead you astray. And if I ever did, then God would move me out of my way. And you can't tell me that people are then going to be able to discriminate when you're making a policy decision and a doctrinal decision. There's just no way. It's talking out both sides of your mouth when you've only represented yourself one way.
To every soul and views you first as a child of God, not as a gay man, not as an ex-husband to a woman or a current husband to a man. It sees you as who you are. With that said,
But that's an erasure of identity.
we all have really cringy, awkward friends who've said incorrect, sometimes maybe even cruel things to LGBTQ members, justified by false conceptions of God or misinterpretations of doctrine. And their bigotry, they have tried.
So he doesn't do that?
It's not just people saying cringy things. It's the overrepresented Mormon population in the Utah legislature that is on an active campaign against trans people in the state of Utah. They have a bill that they passed that you have to go to the bathroom which that corresponds to the gender that you were assigned at birth, and if you had it changed on your birth certificate, which is rare in the state of Utah, from what I am to understand,
that can't happen for minors.
Yeah, it can't happen for minors. So, and this kind of legislation has produced, I mean, Natalie Klein on the school board essentially was bullying a child just because some dude on the opposite team was like, I think that kid is not the gender that they say they are. It's more than just these rude, cruel comments. It goes so much deeper than that.
They can justify. If your religion offers multiple outlets and multiple references and sources and perspectives to justify that behavior, that's the problem. It's not just the political discourse. It's I can justify it because the Book of Mormon says this. I can justify it because the prophet says this.
Yeah.
Like, that's the reason that this is so pervasive. It's not just you have a cringy friend here and there.
Yeah. And to just write it off as cringe.
That's super
disrespectful,
minimizing for the people who are on the other end of those things all the time.
To couch in religious writ or religious culture, and that is wrong simultaneously. If we're talking about, is it okay that doctrine changes? Yes, there's a completely, totally codified runway for how doctrine can change in our church, and it is okay for us as members because there's a mechanism for recognizing that as the revelation.
I think it's safe for the LDS Church to delineate between policy and doctrine, because if they change certain things that they've deemed doctrine, they're
I think the problem is it keeps changing. And what happens is the prophet will say something, and then he says, this is God's word, and he does something like how youth couldn't get baptized if they were the children of queer parents, but then it swaps.
He did say when he said this is doctrine, this
he did.
came from God.
And then it swapped back. So the problem that I have is that it's not that policies or things can change, it's the fact that we're constantly attributing things to God.
Yes.
And then when it changes again, we're like, oh, it was policy. Oh, it's a fallacy of man.
What kills me is, like, I was taught that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so on one hand, I feel like doctrine shouldn't change. And when we do see the changes happening, a lot of the time it's because of social media, it's because of headlines, it's because of the church trying to become more acceptable in society.
More transparent.
So with
Is she on TikTok? I feel like I've seen her.
She looks familiar to me too.
doctrine like polygamy was once practiced, now it's like an FLDS thing, but it was once practiced by the mainstream church. Now it's been disavowed. We no longer do polygamy.
Well,
and yet,
technically it
and
still
yet
is practiced
in
if you-
heaven.
Yo, he's right.
He's right.
He's right.
In heaven, polygamy will be practiced. It's the way, it's the law of heaven, polygamy. And so I feel like it's been disavowed here on earth to like appease society.
Yeah.
And yet in heaven.
The government?
Yeah.
The government? Like, let's reel it back to history for why polygamy was really an issue that they rescinded at the time, was because the government was like, you're doing what now? Nuh-uh. Not here you ain't.
So to summarize, like, you're essentially saying that whenever there's social pressure that changes it,
Yes.
it gets
I don't think
put
it's-
into policy.
I don't think
it's okay for
Not to be a jerk, but this just sounds like, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful, but it sounds like you're just having a gripe. Like, yes, you can be frustrated that things
I have lots of gripes, Kwaku.
Let's have a rap session.
Like, what are you trying to say?
have changed back and forth, but it is good for organizations to change for the better. I don't understand how anyone can say
Because it's a misrepresentation.
And it's not just that they're changing for the better. It's the lack of acknowledgement of the damage that has been done. It's quietly changing things
In the middle of the night,
and,
deleting it off the website.
Yeah, removing web pages, revising scriptures and things that they do to hide their ass because they don't want to admit that what they were doing was wrong. Because
There's
then
no
questions
accountability.
come in of, well, if it was corrupt, why didn't God do anything about it?
Right.
100 years. And
They don't want people having
God
those
let his church be
conversations.
corrupt for that long? Okay.
They don't want people having those conversations because that can lead down a road to deconstruction and looking at things more critically.
Exactly.
Wrong for doctrine to change.
So I came out in the prompt because I'm grateful that the church has made these changes. The problem is that they don't own up to the mistakes they've made. They've never apologized.
John,
Bingo.
you
We
said
love
it
John.
so perfectly, like the words I just said.
To black people for excluding them for over a century. The problem is that when the church teaches something as doctrine to all its members and it leads to carnage, whether it's LGBTQ deaths, destruction of families, systemic racism for over 150 years, the church never owns up and apologizes and says, hey, sorry, black people, we excluded you for 150 years. Sorry, parents of LGBT and siblings of LGBTQ youth. Sorry that your kids died. The church just says, that was just policy. That they were all speaking as men. But then they turn around and say, but if the prophet's speaking now, you have to obey the prophet and you have to follow the prophet. So the church never atones. It never does.
Their atonement, generally speaking, for them will look like we'll donate a bunch of money to the NAACP. We'll try to form a good relationship. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm saying great, move forward, continue to build those relationships and repair. But if there is no accountability, then that's not true moving forward.
No.
That's just, that's PR.
Yeah.
That's PR.
Like, are the organizations that they're donating to aware of the history that they have with
maybe
with
they
black folks and things
perceive
like that?
it as reparations, maybe?
It could be. I would just hope that they are aware of the history and the
I think a lot of times people
really
aren't.
negative things.
They just see bait.
No.
I think a lot of
I don't think they
organizations are never going to, like, especially nonprofits and things, are never going to turn down money because they're like, oh shit, like
it's hard.
This is really helpful. And so I'm not saying that anytime they donate money that it's like blood money and it shouldn't be taken. I'm just saying that it should be accompanied by accountability. Like, what was it? There was recently like an indigenous museum or something that returned their money. Remember?
Yeah, they made a donation and they refused it.
Right. So I'm
Which,
not saying that people
shout out
have
to
to
the
do
principals. Shout out on their principles.
I'm not
on
saying
one.
that it's wrong to take the money because at this point I'm like, yeah, take their fucking money because they're terrible.
Bleed them dry.
But it's like the missing piece here is exactly what John's saying. There's no like, hey guys, don't talk about gay people like this anymore because this policy was wrong and it was wrong and we're not going to do that anymore. It's just the policy's gone. We're not going to talk about it anymore.
We can ordain everybody. Let's go.
Let's move along. Don't talk about it. Don't think about it.
Don't discuss why it was different. Just
no,
move on.
just shut up and
asks
move.
the members to do.
I'm saying this with as much grace as I can muster. Our beloved prophet, Russell M. Nelson, he is nearly 100. I'm not kidding.
99?
He's 99.
We know.
And
he doesn't.
he is running a global organization.
Okay.
That is a bit of a stretch.
That's a stretch. He's 100.
Was going into college. The prophet of our church at his time was still a polygamist, right? I mean,
do you see a problem with that? And I don't want to get political, but it's like the two fucking 80-year-old weirdos that are trying to run for president right now. Like, do we not see a problem with putting people who are fucking senile in positions of power and expecting them to be accepting and with the times? Like, hello? Like, why are you bragging about this? Like, he's 100. He's doing a really good job for 100. Yeah, he's doing a really good job for a 100-year-old racist. Okay. Like, am I supposed to be like, congratulations, Russell. Good job.
How low is the bar?
Like, really? Is that really the justification we're going to give here?
we're talking about old people that he was born before the television, the former Queen of England, and Martin Luther King, and has outlived two of those three things, okay? So, again, give him grace.
I can give grace, but he decided to be the head of an organization. Yeah. And so there's criticism that comes with that. And if you are not, like, we act like Russell's the only one. He has 11 other dudes, 12 other dudes.
14 other dudes.
14 other dudes, really, who are also at the helm of the ship issuing guidance, right?
Not to mention the hundreds of other lower
70s
people and all the other people who are not called who also do basically all the work.
Right. So it's not like he's given
a lot of credit.
He's not in an isolation room, okay? Like people talk about how often the 12 get into arguments with each other about doctrinal things and shit. And so he's not on an icicle here. Like
ultimately, he is the one that everybody listens to.
It's true, yeah.
I'm not going back on the fact that ultimately him and those other 14 men are the root of where these issues are stemming from.
And they're all old.
Decide not to change.
Most of them are older.
Yeah.
People are doing the best.
But then what's the value of a prophet?
Like, do you believe he talks to
The
God?
value of the prophet is look at.
Got his ass.
But
so
he
fair.
talks directly to God.
Sometimes,
Face to
maybe
face,
not.
maybe.
As
I don't
far as
know.
we
Or
know.
God tells him the truth.
They
that he
can't.
needs
They can't even decide among themselves.
No,
if they
all
talk
the
to God or
Mormons
not.
can't even decide.
No, I'm just talking about between the 15 of them. They can't get the story straight of whether
Well,
they
no,
see
and
God face to face or not.
Well, and even historically, there's been certain prophets that have referenced seeing Jesus Christ in form in the temple, and then you have Dallin Oaks who have said none of the 12 have ever seen
Nobody.
Jesus Christ in form. And so, like,
And then
which one is
yeah.
it?
And then like David Bednar is saying a conflicting story.
Go for the world today is what you believe.
We're talking about a beautiful cosmic entity that is Heavenly Father trying to channel information through a 99-year-old man in Salt Lake
But
City.
he does.
Then pick somebody better.
Or get this, maybe he should actually be omnipotent and all powerful. Same thing.
Yes.
Redundant.
Oh, yeah, to you as well.
Yeah, but it gets.
So am I a prophet?
I don't know, are you?
The Mormon Church has
I
done
would
good in the
slap
world.
him. Oh
Rears,
my
please step
God.
forward.
I'm
We
just
do a
interested
lot
to
of
see who says no.
humanitarian aid. We give wheelchairs out to people in like third world nations. I mean, there's a lot of good.
That say the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on the back. I have seen them.
do. I would agree that I would also say, you know, there's some things that other
Gotta have the
religions do
branding.
better than us. The LDS.
So
groups
everybody
do a great
agreed with
job.
this. I don't think we need to finish watching this, but I think
Yeah.
the point here stands that the Mormon Church does do good in the world. They have a lot of money that they could be doing more, right? But I will give credit where credit is due, that I appreciate that they do give money to certain causes, right? Which is great. But I think where a lot of people struggle is where, like, we, I think as a society, have a hard time holding two things to be true at the same time. And so it feels like with the freaking, I mean, I'll use John's word, with the carnage that the church is also committing, like with the LGBTQ plus community, it's hard to also look at them and be like, yeah, they do some good in the world, because they're literally like instituting doctrines that leads people to kill themselves. And so it feels really hard to hold both of those at the same time. And so I can see where people would disagree with this, and I think that's valid and fair. I don't think there's anything that's going to like equate this out or make it so like doing that is ever okay. But I think objectively we can look at like they donate money and they do some things that like I'm not going to argue. I won't concede on that.
Yeah. And the argument that I always make is that they could be doing a lot more in the world.
Yeah. They've got the money.
They have, and they hoard money like a dragon in a fantasy novel.
Literally.
It is incredible the amount of money, the amount of property, and all the rest that they have combined. There could be a lot done. And the number one clapback, quote unquote, that people will try and do is, oh, well, you probably could be doing a lot more too. I'm not a Christian.
I'm not a billionaire.
I give where I can. I help people where I can.
God.
But I don't understand where this came in, that God needs more money. God needs an investment portfolio. God needs to
hoard
bail
wealth.
out his insurance company that is not doing so hot.
God needs a mall.
God needs a mall and things like that. All of these things could be sold to the benefit of humanity.
More money than the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They outbid Bill and Melinda on shit all the time.
Yeah, on properties.
So it's like there is a lot of money.
And even in that, I remember watching a TikTok live where somebody brought up the fact that the church had purchased an entire business park. And the cope that happens when they do this is like, oh, they'll probably use it as staging for humanitarian aid or whatever, because it's down in Florida.
Yeah.
It's close to the coast. No, it is an investment property.
Yeah. And they have plenty of those.
There are plenty of investment properties. I know specifically one in Texas. There's an off... Get out of here. The favorite one that I like to bring out is a office building down in Texas that is leased out to a defense contracting firm, whether it's Northrop Grumman or Raytheon, I can't remember.
It's just for profit.
It's for profit. So it's ridiculous that they're doing this, and they're doing it tax free. I mean,
They're
they played a big
religious
part
organization.
in
Hello?
the GameStop short sell or whatever that's
that
called.
whole
I'm not
fiasco.
investing savvy.
Like
but
a church is doing that. Like if a church
yeah.
has enough money
If Jeff Bezos was doing this, totally makes sense. I
Yeah.
understand that he's got the capital to do it. He wants to grow his capital.
He's a billionaire. What are you gonna do?
Not hot on that, but whatever. But when an entity called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if the entity has Jesus Christ in its name, I do not
and when your members
expect that to
are
be
tithe
doing that.
paying, when your members pay 10% of their income as a requisite for being able to fully participate in church activities, then that's also a problem. Like there's currently a lawsuit right now that's ongoing, and I don't think I imagine it's not going to hold water, but there's a lawsuit ongoing right now where a couple is suing the church and they're saying that they used their tithe money to build the mall. And that was not disclosed as part of what tithing was used for at the time. And they've
John
changed
Huntsman
that
was doing
since. John Huntsman still has, I think, a lawsuit ongoing as well. And so I don't think it'll go anywhere because the church is airtight about a lot of these things. And they have a disclosure statement on the tithing documents and on the website when you submit that they have lawsuit. They have the ability, like they'll use it for what you direct it as if they can, but they always have full discretion to use it where they feel like it's needed. And so it goes beyond. Like, I'm glad the church donates more. Like, I'm not going to be able to donate that much money because I'm not a fucking billionaire, okay? Yeah. So, like, we're talking about apples and oranges here. We're not even in the same dimension. So, if I had billions of dollars, then hell yeah, I'd be doing a hell of a lot more than the church. I can tell you that, and you can hold me to that. Should that ever happen. But that's not going to happen because it doesn't happen to people like us. This is a giant institution that represents itself as a church.
Yeah. A corporation that represents itself as a church even. Anyway, we're going to wrap this up because I don't know what I'll whittle this down to, but my camera says 2 hours and 16 minutes. So anyway, this was a lot. This is a good conversation.
Yeah.
There were some goofy things said, some things that I didn't expect as well. So
yeah,
kudos to everybody who participated in everything. Kudos to everybody who stuck around. We appreciate you. You're awesome. If you liked what you saw and heard and maybe it blew out your eardrums, hopefully I can adjust the audio at sometimes. You can hit the subscribe button. If you were extraordinarily impressed, you can join our membership. There are cool benefits. Or our Patreon, you get the same benefits. Although membership's a little cool because you get little custom emojis
badge.
And you get a little badge. And it's cool. You can participate in the live chats when we go and do streaming and stuff like that. You get your name coming up the screen. Shout out to all of our amazing members and patrons. We love y'all.
You make this possible.
And we also have social media. You can find us at Jordan and McKay on Instagram and on TikTok. It's awesome. You can join our Discord community, which is full of awesome Nevermos and Ex-Mos and just people who like to hang out. You can go check that out. Link is in the description or on screen right now.
It is moderated.
Yes, and they also make announcements for when we're going live and stuff like that. So shout out to our moderators. They are amazing. They help us out a ton. And then finally, did I miss anything? That's it, actually. We appreciate your presence. We love you. Doing the little hands in the background.
Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already.
And we will see you next time.